The door of hell. Rukia told Chad as she watched the gates open to welcome its new victim. That monster is getting his just punishment for his crimes. They heard the demented laughter as the hollow was ran through on a giant blade, curiously missing more of his body, as the former serial killer was dragged into the burning abyss. Ichigo finally came by after the deed. I'm going to bed. This is enough for one day. Before making his way home, Chad said his goodbyes as well while Rukia joined Ichigo, asking out Urahara's shop. It was the next day, another day of living a human life in a world she had no place residing in. However, with her only link to her home of Soul Society being the orders she is given, she still had to make do with supplies. Thankfully the former captains residing in Karakura seemed to have a consistent supply of necessary materials. Here she was now, loading up on those materials. Okay, will that be all, Kuchiki-san? Urahara asked his current customer, filling her request form of Soul Reaper equipment and supplies. Not yet. She replied, getting to what she felt was the most crucial piece. I need some Jikongai for Ichigo. Assuming you have yet to give him one. She did have a few complaints about her body, but the former captain did tell her prolonged use might bring up some bugs in the Jigai. That was handled a while ago. The eccentric inventor told her. But he doesn't like using him. Why? If he does, he could just slip out of his classes no problem if a hollow shows up during school. He wouldn't even need to worry about his body then. She fished for more information about her stubborn and forced partner's life. All he said about that soul was, he's an annoying useless pain. He told his customer. Trying to avoid telling her about the soul in question. Fine, she responded, I'll get him to tell me then. She turned to leave before remembering some details from the earlier night. By the way, that boy Sato said he was one of Ichigo's training partners and he has some strange power. Anything else you'd like to tell me? She glared at the jovial man. Urahara brought out his fan and laughed. Ichigo has some good friends. Let's leave it at that. He remembered that talk with Chad. Even now he didn't know everything about it, just that it was hollow-based racial and power. Everyone involved agreed to keep the nature of his abilities a secret for obvious reasons. She had to confront a certain strawberry about certain details. Karakura High. So that's the end of that, huh? Kigo asked Ichigo after they discussed the exorcism of Chad's new bird. Yeah, poor kid didn't have any friends when he was alive. So we filled that void with a day of fun. Ichigo responded, drinking his juice while Mizuiro and Chad feed the little bird. They agreed to not relay the real story. Those two didn't need to be dragged into that world of ghosts and monsters. Ichigo. They heard someone cheer happily. They turned to see Rukia, finally at school, waving at Ichigo and smiling. Hey look, it's your girlfriend Ichigo. Mizuiro said casually as the petite Shinigami made her way towards them. What? Kigo cried out. Ichigo, when did this happen? He said, tears comically running down his face as he pleaded to the young Soul Reaper. How could you go around, picking up chicks, without me? Get me a date too, Ichi dash. Kigo was promptly quieted with a swift punch to his chest as Rukia finally reached her target. What do you need, Rukia? He asked her. I just have some questions I need to ask you in private. She said, smiling and acting cutesy to keep up appearances. Ichigo noticed some of the subtle signals she was trying to send to him to recognize that she means Soul Reaper specific questions. Alright, let's go. He said, following her to a private place they could talk. Well, there they go. Mizuiro said, still relatively unfazed by the sight before him. Ichigo, you traitor. Kigo screamed out. How can you call yourself my friend and not hang with the guys? You tray dash. He was hit with the juice Ichigo had on hand that he threw. I don't think Ichigo can possibly help you get a date, Kigo. He could try. Kigo grumbled from the ground. Chad was just watching in slight amusement. With Ichigo and Rukia. So what is it, Rukia? He asked as they got to an empty area of the school. Kisuke said that you had an artificial soul already. She said, skipping to the heart of the matter. May I see it? Really? He said, raising an eyebrow. Fine. He reached inside his bag and pulled out a cartoonish yellow lion stuffed animal. This is Khan. Kisuke gave him to me when I was 10. He told me how Soul Reapers use Jikongan when they need a quick eject and to keep their cover. Rukia took the stuffed doll from her teammate and inspected it. I didn't like the dispenser, so I tried this instead. By the way, what's with that whole soul candy thing? He asked, confused by that name from so long ago. Rukia adopted an undignified blush, embarrassed by the reason behind the name. The Shinigami's Women Association didn't like the name Jikongan. Said it wasn't cute enough. She didn't like the name either, but she was a representative of her clan. She needed to present herself as such. And not give Ichigo more reason to think less of her. Well, he's no chappie. She said, looking the lion in the face, letting her inner girl take over. But he is pretty cute. She caved, hugging the doll to her chest. Your melons may not be big, but they're really nice too, Rukia. A muffled voice spoke out. Rukia heard it coming from her chest and threw the doll up while screaming. Ichigo, staying calm, reached out and caught the perverted spirit. Nice catch. Shut up. Ichigo growled at his irritating stuffed animal. Ichigo. What the hell is that? She screamed, pointing at the lion in his hands. Like I said, this is Khan. He said, like it was the simplest thing. He's my artificial soul. Yo. He greeted with a raised paw. I don't like using him because he's a pervert. I'm worried about what he would do in my body. Ichigo remembered the last time he left Khan in his body. That was a bad time. Now I get your reluctance. Rukia said, finally calming down. She never thought putting a soul in an inanimate object would yield such results. Why do you keep him then? Because he's useful to have. He told her. When he recognizes a threat he becomes a decent fighter. I usually leave him with my sisters because they haven't a full grasp on their abilities yet. Rukia remembered when that was an idea Soul Society had, but it was deemed inhumane and all such souls from that project were destroyed. Just then her phone was going off, signifying new orders. Ichigo. I know. He said, unzipping Khan's back and pulled out a small green pill that he swallowed. The two separated and Khan began stretching in Ichigo's body. Been a while since I was in here. He said. Remember Khan? Yeah, lots of scowls and no flirting or peeping. He dismissed his boss as the two Soul Reapers left to find their targets. Would it kill him to try to live a little? He asked no one in particular. Now, let's see. He quickly checked the time. Almost time for the next class, better get moving. Ichigo's class. Agreed. We'll ask him together. Tatsuki said as she and Orihime finished their lunch. After warding off a certain red-haired lesbian, the two could coordinate their plans without a hitch. They agreed to share Ichigo and would start with a simultaneous date between the three of them. The date would be at the Don Kananji show, coming up that weekend. They felt this was the chance to make their move. Khan came through the door and the two friends walked right up to him, prepared to ask when Orihime noticed something. Hey, where's Ichigo? Tatsuki and Khan were surprised by the question. Khan was trying to come up with an explanation while Tatsuki took a second glance to confirm her ditzy friend's claim. Orihime was surprisingly observant their mutual crush. Yeah, you're not Ichigo. Where is he? Khan pulled them both out of the classroom and into the still empty hallway. Okay, first question. Khan said as he got their attention. What makes you think I'm not Ichigo? Tatsuki was glaring at the imposter of her crush when Orihime explained why. You seem like a complete and utter waste of a character with no importance or impact to the series. she said with a completely straight face. Khan felt the words stab into him like arrows. Fair enough. Next question. He said after pulling out said arrows. How much do you know about him? I know he's spiritually aware. Orihime said. Are you related to this Soul Reaper stuff? Tatsuki asked, causing the two to gape at her. She shrugged and told them she overheard Yoruchi-sensei talking with someone about Ichigo. Well, no use hiding it now. Khan reasoned. Yes, Ichigo is a Soul Reaper, I'm an artificial soul filling in for him while he's doing his job, and he probably won't come back for the rest of the day. He said while sensing another hollow. DMN. Tatsuki cursed. All that motivation wasted. They were really nervous but were determined to power through it when Ichigo showed up, but it wasn't Ichigo in the end. What? Were you going to ask Ichigo out? He asked, causing them to blush furiously and attempt to deny it. In response, using some of his enhanced reflexes from his many upgrades, he snatched up the show tickets they had. All three together. Khan asked, impressed, and said at the same time. He may not like Ichigo too much, but he alone practically saved his life and gave him his own to live. Sure, he was the servant of the Kurosakis, but they never made him feel as such. He had a life debt to his master. I'll accept in his stead. He said, grinning while writing on one ticket. I owe Orihime and Tatsuki one date. And trust me. He smiled and winked. He'll definitely go. The rest of the day passed as such. Normal and uneventful. Until Ichigo found that ticket. Later that night in Ichigo's room. Khan. He yelled at the stuffed lion sitting on his desk, going over the notes Khan managed to make for him. What's this thing about me owing Orihime and Tatsuki a date? What? You told me to be you and I thought you would agree. Khan said in his defense. Two hot chicks together at once, what straight man would say no? He said in an overdramatic fashion. A busy Soul Reaper, that's who. He growled. What's this? Exclaimed Isshin and Yuzu, who heard him from downstairs. My son has a date with two girls at the same time. Oh Masaki, my love. Our boy is becoming a fine man. Who are your girlfriends, Ichi-ni? Yuzu gazed at her brother. Is it Tatsuki and Orihime? She met Orihime a few times and they got along while Tatsuki came to the clinic quite a few times when she started Hakuta training. Karen. Ichigo's got a date. With two girls. Didn't peg you for a womanizer, Ichi-ni. Karen said. I don't have any dates and I'm not a womanizer. Ichigo yelled in his defense. If you don't want it, I'll go. Khan said. You are not going anywhere near them. Ichigo roared at the lion. Do you hate them? No. He yelled, insulted. Do you want them to think that? No. He said, more subdued. So you'll go with them? Khan confirmed. Yes. Ichigo said, feeling defeated in a way. Good. It's official. Khan said with Isshin ending the group chat on Ichigo's phone. It was then that he realized that he could have talked to them and declined the invite gently like a proper man. Khan. He growled, more mad at being tricked than anything else. Relax, I'll probably never do anything ever again and be replaced by a much more interesting character who is way more upbeat than me and would be a great contrast for you. The Date and the Foolish Exorcist. Karakura Hospital, June 17. 6 years ago she almost died for him. 6 years ago, he learned about his potential. 6 years ago, he swore to destroy the Quincy King with his own 2 hands. 6 years since she last opened her eyes. 6 years since he last heard her voice. 6 years since she fell into a dreamless sleep, hanging on to life by a thread. These were the thoughts of 2 sons in particular, visiting their mothers in a specially made room of the hospital. The one day that their teacher would permit them to skip school, if only for a scarce few hours. For the simple pleasures of comfort they could find. A trace of a smile or a slight grip of the hand, letting the sons know that they are still alive. Anything real than the constant beeps and air blowing of the machines they were connected to. 6 years Ichigo. Yuryu said to his cousin, overlooking his own sleeping mother. The effects of time and atrophy being waylaid by a device Urahara made to keep their bodies active enough while unconscious. Both Kane and Masaki looked virtually the same as when they fell asleep so long ago. Only 2 years left, and we still have this Aizen fellow to be wary of. I know Yuryu. He told his cousin. Aizen is after whatever Urahara made and he claims to have hidden it in a safe place. Chances are Aizen will be a concern before Yuha Bak, in which case I can hopefully get the help of the Godai 13. It was a long shot, but they all decided to choose when a ready threat was presented to show the captain commander the whole issue. Right. I just think we should step up our training. Yuryu was doing his father's training to the letter, but he was yet unable to join Ichigo on the front just yet. Urahara was fixing up new equipment for him to use in order to exorcise the hollows instead of outright destroying them. Unfortunately, this was actually a difficult process that Urahara was all too eager to make possible. As one of the few real challenges he's faced, he had to split his time between training his students and preparing Yuryu's upgraded equipment. We can't bring overly unwanted attention to ourselves, Yuryu. We're already pushing it as it is. Rukia told him that she was reaching the time limit of how long she could be in the living world, and no matter what she tells Soul Society, they would come investigate. Best to prolong that as much as possible. Let's keep as we are until necessary. That's time, boys. They heard a stern voice tell them. They turned back to see their fathers, Ryukin and Isshin, waiting for them. You two should get to school. Isshin said as he walked into the room. And Yuryu, Ryukin said, catching his son before he left. I'll push you when you are ready. He assured his son, letting him know he should have more faith in his father and allies as well as himself. Understood. He said before the cousins left to attend their final classes. So I heard you have a date. Or is it dates? He said, trying to put up the image of an average teen in spite of reality and his own apathy. I think it counts as dates. Ichigo groaned, still somewhat annoyed that he was forced into this situation. He had nothing against Orihime or Tatsuki, but he would have preferred to face them personally. This would give a blow to his image, but he also couldn't afford any distractions for when the battles come. As such, he confronted them again and accepted the date like a man and of his own volition. He just wished that it wasn't to some hack spiritualist medium. He also hoped his teachers won't find out, but he was a realist in that regard. As if his dad clamoring for his new daughters and grandkids wasn't bad enough. Urahara Shoten. Ichigo. Cried his dark-skinned martial arts master. Why? I thought we raised you better than this. You should have 5 girlfriends at least. He was doing everything he could to ignore Yoruchi while Tessai was finally teaching him the 90+ level Bakudo spells. Now Yoruchi, we can only teach him so much. Urahara tried to calm his old friend. Ichigo's still just an innocent kid, we can't expect him to be an instant playboy. He whipped out his fan. But he is well on his way to that, isn't he? The two friends laughed as Ichigo failed an incantation, distracted by his teacher's antics. Well, I could give that final push. The mischievous cat said as she pulled her student's hand to her BRSTS. What do you say, Ichigo? She sang seductively into his ear. Shall I teach you the pleasures of a woman? This time the spell exploded and pinned Ichigo's hand in place while tying everyone else up. Tessai growled. Ichigo, you can't allow distractions to affect you like this. He scolded his student as they freed themselves from the botched Bakudo. Maybe you should sleep with Yoruchi, if only to help your concentration. He suggested casually, making Ichigo turn redder than his namesake. I'm in. She cheered, already starting to pull off her top while Kisuke went to get a camera. Don't I get a say in this? Ichigo cried, backing out of the store slowly. Never. I called on your first a while ago. She yelled, looking at him hungrily. What purpose does this serve? Ichigo asked. Stupid slapstick. Kisuke said while he set up the camera with Tessai holding a reflector board, with Jinta and Yururu behind Ichigo with rope and tape. Fortunately, Ichigo was prepared. Bakudo number 21, Senkienten. He yelled while pushing off the ground and into the vacant lot, shielded in a massive cloud of red smoke. Get back here. Yoruchi yelled as she managed to find and tackle her quarry, only to see him fade. She was positive she managed to grab him, but it turned out to be an illusion. She wasn't sure whether to feel pride or annoyance. He was progressing splendidly, but it was rare for anything to escape her. Nice job, Ichigo. She complimented. But that certainly wasn't at Sasimi, so how did you do that? Kurosaki Clinic. What did you do to yourself, Ichini? Yuzu cried while applying her healing Kido with Rukia's to heal her brother's legs. I pushed myself too hard with an experimental move. It was a mix of his Hirenkyaku with Shunpa and that skill his Hollow Zangetsu called, Sonido. The result was an overexerted body with most of his muscles torn from the pressure and friction. He almost fully recovered from the attempt and could get back to the important matters, his upcoming date. This is your first date, Ichini. You need to impress. Stated Yuzu firmly as herself, Karen, and Rukia rummaged through his clothes to find a proper outfit. He's going to watch a hack, he can go normal. Karen retorted, knowing that Tatsuki wouldn't really care. And you're here because? He asked Rukia, who proceeded to put chappy bunny ears on him. For my own entertainment. Ichigo responded by throwing her out of his room. His sisters ended up with getting Ichigo a casual get-up after a few arguments. Remember Ichi and I. You have to join the fun to enjoy it. Yuzu told her stubborn brother before crossing her arms over her chest and laughing. Boha ha ha ha. Ichigo looked over to Karen for help, but she could only shrug. Now you. No. Ichigo. It's your responsibility to make sure they enjoy it. She scolded, pouting at her older brother. We also want you to have fun too, Ichi. Karen said, sitting next to her brother. You should take some time off. Relax. We just want to see you happy. She leaned against him while Yuzu was giving him puppy eyes. Ichigo sighed in annoyance that he made his little sisters worry so much, gesturing Yuzu to get closer before wrapping his arms around the twins. Fine. I'll take it easy and have fun, you too. He reassured his sisters. I'm supposed to worry about you too, not the other way around. He said, making the siblings giggle as they fell asleep in his comfortable embrace. Karakura's abandoned hospital that weekend. The place was filled with people, either to see the show or setting it up for the live broadcast. Ichigo found out that Orihime and Tatsuki knew about him being a Soul Reaper and what his training was for. They were now using this time to talk about whether this show had any validity to its name, Ghost Bust. So is there really a spirit here? Orihime asked, eating some candy they brought from Urahara's shop where they met. Feels like it. Ichigo said, feeling a familiar malice that was born from a hollow. Probably an earthbound spirit. One that's tied to a particular location. One of the stage crew got too close to the old building and angry screams filled the air, surprising Ichigo's dates but not himself. You can't tell until someone trespasses though. Orihime and Tatsuki were suddenly more glad that Ichigo decided to come, latching onto him for a sense of security and warmth. Don't worry, he's not a hollow. Not yet. He thought, looking at the man wrapped in chains, the hole in his chest almost opened. His cries of greed gaining no sympathy from the young Soul Reaper. Listen up everyone. The broadcast had begun. Hyping most everyone up for the show proper to begin. Here he is. The spirit medium of the new century. The messenger of hell. Dawn. Kananji. He yelled, bringing everyone's attention to the helicopter the supposed spiritualist jumped out of. The spirits are always with you. He cheered, free falling before using his parachute. The crowd roared in approval, while a scant few who could truly see the spirit remained silent. Urahara and Yoruchi silently came up behind their disciple to soothe the worries he might be having. "Don't worry, Ichigo," he said as carefree as ever, bringing the trio's attention to the exiled Soul Reapers. "It takes a long time to become a hollow on one's own. I'd give him another 6 months, tops," he told Ichigo, making the substitute feel somewhat better. Until Orihime asked a very good question. Urahara-san. Is he supposed to be doing that?" she asked worriedly, pointing at Don Kananji who was stabbing his staff into the demi-hollow's chest, trying to force it open. All the experienced spiritually aware beings present let out a sigh of annoyance. "No, Inoue-san," he replied before pushing Ichigo's back with his cane, ejecting his student's soul. "No, he is not." Ichigo wasted no time rushing over to stop the man from making a terrible mistake. "Maybe you should just go to an arcade next time," the shopkeeper suggested. "Yeah." The girls agreed. Ichigo made it between the demi-hollow and the tan-skinned spiritualist and managed to throw them apart, surprising the audience. "What's this?" the announcer cried out. Don Kananji was thrown back. "What kind of spirit is this?" "Hey!" the shaded man yelled out. "What's the big idea? You're just a ghost." He was surprised, this had never happened to him before. All the spirits he exorcised before were all chained down, but this one was free of those chains. "So you actually can see spirits?" Ichigo said to the man. Tan-skinned, fanning dreads, rather thin mustache, and he dresses like a dorky superhero but without the spandex. "Of course I can," he retorted. "I'm the premier spiritualist of the new century." Then he came to a rather absurd conclusion of Ichigo being a fan despite being dead while the Soul Reaper chose to focus on the turning hollow. Unfortunately, he was too late. The damage was already done as the earthbound soul exploded. Don Kananji announced his success, Ichigo kept on the lookout for when the hollow appeared. "Not out of the woods yet, Kananji," Ichigo told the faux exorcist, grabbing his attention before putting to the roof of the building. The hollow appeared as a humanoid frog of a sickly green color. "With Tatsuki and Orihime." "Yoruchi-sensei?" Tatsuki asked her teacher, feeling a hollow's dark energy for the first time of her life. "Ichigo will be all right." "Right?" Yoruchi looked down on her other disciple before breaking out a confident grin. "Don't worry, Tatsuki," she said, wrapping an arm around the young girl's shoulders. "A hollow like that is nothing for Ichigo. Have more faith like your friend here." Tatsuki looked over to Orihime and saw fear and unease, but not concern. Orihime could feel Ichigo would be all right. She was so embarrassed, she should have known Ichigo better than that. She watched her future boyfriend with renewed confidence and felt gutsy enough to cheer him on. "Yeah. Kick that monster's butt," she yelled out, giving Orihime confidence to do the same. "Go. Win." Orihime squealed. "With Ichigo. The cheers of the fans give me strength to purge this evil before me." Kananji yelled out proudly, causing more cheers as the hollow descended. Ichigo could only smirk as he heard his friends and family cheer for him instead. The hollow was swiftly descending on the two with Kananji bravely challenging the monster while Ichigo stood off to the side a little, waiting for a chance. When the hollow came close enough to snap the foolish human in his jaws, Ichigo then delivered a spinning kick into the hollow's back. The result was a gaping hole in the building with Ichigo nailing his landing. "Let me guess," Kananji looked at the boy in amazement at his display of strength, "you're not going to run no matter what I say, are you?" The man looked at Ichigo in shock and disgust. "Run? How can I run? Do you know what my ratings are?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. 1 in every 4 households watch my show and most of those viewers are children. A silence washed over the crowd as they listened. "That means I have to be brave." I have to show courage. I have to be a good role model. He lost his showman attitude and felt more like a person rather than a celebrity to the audience at that moment. Sure, I get scared, finding dark and malicious spirits like these. But if I run, what would that tell the kids? That there is no hope. I can't allow something like that. There was a pause of silence before the crowd roared in approval, seeing Don Kanonji in another, better light. More than just a fun program, but as someone who tries to bring smiles no matter what because it's right to do. That means your only fault here is ignorance. Ichigo said, keeping the exorcist's attention while the hollow made its way back to them. Hado number 1, show. He pointed at the mindless hungry beast and shot a pulse of force at the creature, sending him to the back of the hospital again. And collapsing the front gate in the process. Really need to work on that. Come on, there's something you need to see. He told the spiritualist as he blasted the rubble away with another show. Very well. He said, recognizing that whatever this boy was going to show him was for his eyes only. They entered the abandoned, decrepit hospital, searching for the monster that was their prey. Ichigo unsheathed his Zanpakuto and took a few experimental swings. DMN. It's too cramped in here. He realized before gripping Zangetsu with both hands. I guess now's as good a time as any. His blade began to glow as he started to focus on his Ryatsu and blade. Everything all right, partner? Kanonji asked, feeling a camaraderie with the youth. He gaped in amazement as Ichigo managed to turn his massive blade into a pair of katana, one in each hand. He twirled the blades in hand to get a feel for the new style he put upon himself. Amazing. What is this boy? He could only think to himself as his world began to expand with every moment he was with Ichigo. He's coming. Ichigo yelled as the wall burst out with the hollow charging at them. Kanonji closed in and caught the hollow's mouth open with his staff. Ichigo quickly got into its space and made 2 swift slashes, severing the hollow's limbs. The monster roared out in agony as it collapsed, having no support to keep it upright. The beast lay before the two, helpless as Ichigo made the final blow through the hollow's mask, ending its cries and struggles. Great job, partner. Kanonji cheered, celebrating what he felt was a hard-won victory. Ichigo did not allow for this man to live in his ignorance anymore. Don't celebrate, Kanonji. Ichigo said, pointing at the disintegrating hollow. The form of the monster dissipated, revealing the broken man inside. Wait. The exorcist said brokenly. He was. I thought I. He was stunned, feeling everything he thought he knew crumble around him. Hollows. Ichigo said. Corrupted souls of those that lost their hearts, had their chains that kept them peaceful removed. Kanonji gasped in shock, remembering every time he believed he purified a lost or bad spirit, breaking chains he thought were their torment. He's made monsters out of innocence. What have I been doing? He asked, not to Ichigo but to himself. Tears flowing from his eyes as his unintentional crimes came down on his shoulders. You've been acting out of ignorance. Ichigo said, making the near-broken man look back at the true exorcist. I don't blame you for your actions. You never knew nor had a chance to know. You wanted to be a hero so you became one. How can I still be a hero? He demanded. How can I possibly call myself that now? Ichigo shrugged and brought them both back to the cheering crowd, hailing their hero Don Kanonji. I say keep doing what you've been doing. Ichigo snatched a pen and paper and began to write. Only now, you do it right. He gave the spiritualist the note with his quirky teacher's address. Go to this man before attempting anything like this again. He'll help you on your road of redemption. He gave the man one last smile before disappearing in a burst of speed back to his own body. Kanonji looked down at his note and felt himself change into a new man. Boha ha ha ha. He laughed out, cherishing the crowd's roars of approval. Thank you, boy. He thought while announcing his full triumph. You've shown me what I really need to do. I won't let you down, my friend. A few days later. You still put too much energy into it. Scolded Tessai as Ichigo finished up his training with the Kido masters. I almost shudder to think what might happen if you go all out. He's right, Ichigo. Kisuke drawled as he rose from his nap. You want to make allies of the Soul Reapers, not kill them. You need to be able to hold back more. The building stayed up, didn't it? Ichigo shot back at his teachers, referencing the abandoned hospital from earlier. No, it collapsed after Tessai and I stopped keeping it upright. The resulting shockwaves from his Hado did so much structural damage the building was going to fall apart with him inside. Ryukin was quick to purchase the land and start another project there. Anyway, don't you have another date with Arisawa-san and Inoue-san? Kisuke teased as Ichigo ran out the door, passing a man in a trench coat who entered the store. Kisuke smiled at who would become another regular at his store. So, how can I help you? Don Kanonji. The archer returns. Some time later. After the events at the abandoned hospital, the show, Ghost Bust, made some changes to the methods made in sending the spirits to the afterlife. The very same changes and the statements he made had turned Don Kanonji into the #1 TV star in the entire nation, and he never forgot the lessons Ichigo had taught him. Tatsuki and Orihime demanded a redo on that date Ichigo had agreed on as well and went to the arcade. Tatsuki, feeling bold, imposed a challenge that whoever won in the games they played gets a kiss from the person of their choice. Ichigo never won once, whether by choice or being bad at games, he left his girls feeling very giddy. Things did get brighter for him after winning them a tiger and lion plushie as a group of punks tried to pick up his dates. His home clinic got a few more customers after that. The falling hours were coming fast and Ichigo, being the gentleman he was, escorted his ladies to their homes. Thanks for Ichi-kun, Ichigo. Orihime cheered, holding her stuffed lion. Ichigo won for her, as he and Tatsuki told her good night in front of her apartment. No problem. He said, less enthusiastically. I'm sure my reputation can recover after this. I just hope you had a good time. She responded by leaning in next to him and planting a swift kiss on his cheek. I really did. She smiled before walking toward her brother, who was smiling at Ichigo and shooting him a thumbs up. In his mind, as long as it made Orihime happy then so was he. He knew Ichigo and Tatsuki personally and had faith in the two. Ichigo weakly responded, still a little unsure about his feelings in all this. He was supposed to prepare for a coming war and polygamy was kind of frowned on in the present day. The cheers from Zangetsu, Urahara, and his father didn't help manners in the slightest. Now how about the brave protector escorts their date home? Tatsuki teased, latching onto Ichigo's free arm and grinning the whole time. Am I protecting you or the other way around? He joked, as they proceeded to head for Tatsuki's house. They spent the time in silence, reflecting on the day and their activities. He liked Orihime because she was so upbeat and happy, she made him happy because her attitude was so infectious. Tatsuki just understood Ichigo on that guy level, she was active while Orihime was passive. A good contrast and would probably work wonders if he needed a shoulder to lean on or a much-needed kick in his butt. He may not like the idea of being a player, but he also knew they weren't giving him the option either. Ichigo? Tatsuki asked after walking for a while. Why didn't you tell me before? She felt hurt. Ichigo used to talk to her about everything but she had to find out about him being a Soul Reaper. About him preparing for a war since he was a child. How could he not talk to her about that? Wasn't she his sparring partner with Chad? Wasn't she his childhood friend? Did all that mean nothing? This doesn't concern you, Tatsuki. He said solemnly. You're a normal girl, you should worry about normal things. I do. She countered. I worry about my friends and want to help. She glared at him as he avoided looking at her. Does Chad know? Ichigo remained silent for a bit. Yes. She pushed him away. And slapped him. What makes him so special? She was developing tears. He gets to know the big secrets but I can't. Ichigo wasn't looking at her, he didn't want to hurt his oldest friend. What about that study partner of yours? Does Yuryu know? His silence was all the answer she needed. Why? Because you're powerless. He said told her. Chad can shoot off blasts of rapier like a cannon. Yuryu is from a long line of people that specialized in fighting hollows. He grabbed her by the shoulders and looked deep into her eyes. You have been learning the same martial arts that I have, but you're not fast enough to keep yourself safe, strong enough to overpower these opponents, and most importantly, he held her to his chest, tightly. I would never forgive myself if something happened to you. Tatsuki just stood there, trapped in his arms, feeling his worry. She relaxed after a bit. It's not fair. She wrapped her arms around him in a more comforting manner. When did I become the one that needed protecting? They stayed like that for close to an hour before finally separating. They parted ways after that. Tatsuki to her home, Ichigo to just wander about. He felt terrible telling Tatsuki she was powerless, that she couldn't help him. But he also knew it was true in his other life, she was more of a liability. Charging into fights she would not be able to win. That really was mean of you to say. He heard a soft mewl coming from his female mentor, in human form for now. She does want to help you. She's not like Chad or Yuryu or even my sisters. He responded, a little despondent after the talk with his oldest friend. She doesn't have any power, or if she does then they would have manifested by now. He said as he began his trek to his home, back to an overly curious father and sister while the other one retains a semblance of respect for privacy, a dutiful Shinigami that'll invade his privacy at the slightest hint of a hollow, and his empty bed. Don't be so sure, Ichigo. Yoruichi thought as Ichigo left. When a girl is determined, they're going to achieve their goals. As Tatsuki is not as powerless as you think. She grinned to herself, remembering the events of her last spar with her fiery disciple. How there was fire in her strikes. There are certainly more surprises for us down the road. She was thinking this while keeping her focus on her students, but I will have that, but Ichigo. Oh yes, I will. Soon Ichigo faded into the distance and she herself made her way back to the shop. Midday in an ally. It was the third time that week. He had exams, he tries to study, Rukia gets a call, they roll out, then nothing. No hollow, no soul reaper, just a lone soul. Now things were getting fishy. It was an unspoken rule between the cousins that they study by themselves during exam week in order to create a sense of competition in order to push the other. He never beat Yuryu in the top spot once. This time was no different aside from the constant interruptions because he doesn't want the guilt of Rukia dying because she still hasn't recovered enough of her powers. Now here they were, on another wild goose chase with no hollow to fight and a pathetically annoying soul. Once was strange, twice was a coincidence, third time's a pattern. While Rukia was fiddling with her receiver, Ichigo went to get answers. His first clue was a rapier trace in the area that felt vaguely familiar. Hey! Spirit! He yelled at the overweight doe-sized middle-aged spirit of a man missing a chunk of his side. What happened here? What did you see? He demanded roughly. He was squeaking out, still terrified from the near-second death experience before crying out, thank you. He leapt toward Ichigo with tears streaming down his face. I was so scared I almost peed myself. His cries were met with a crushing stomp on the back of his head as Ichigo tried to emphasize his irritation. What did you see? He punctuated with grinds on the fat schmuck's head. I was so scared, I had my eyes shut the whole time. He whimpered out after Rukia pulled Ichigo off of him. After he said that, Rukia wanted to stomp the miserable soul from existence. Ichigo had another question for his theory. If he was right, then he might have some choice words with a certain relative. Did you hear anything? He surprised both Spirit and Rukia by the oddity of the question. Anything like a whistling sound? Rukia looked at the teen in confusion while the spirit actually seemed to remember something. Yeah. The spirit said tentatively. Yeah, there was a whistle. After that the monster disappeared. There were only so many people in Karakura that could fit that description, and a quick glance to a building's roof gave him all the answers he needed. Ichigo, Rukia asked her scowling teammate, what is it? Ichigo's response was to swiftly perform the Kanso on the unsuspecting soul before heading home. Nothing important. I have to study for exams, so leave me alone. He growled, trying to make it seem like he was more in a bad mood because of the waste of time and not anything else. After what happened to Soken, he wasn't too trusting of Soul Reapers when it came to his other side. After exams week. Ah! Finally! Kigo cried out as he slumped over his desk, a long week of tests and exams finally over. I'm dead. You certainly look it. Mizuiro quipped, looking just as terrible himself. These exams are important if you want to get anywhere in life after high school. Ichigo told them, darkly remembering Ryukin lecturing the boys after one mishap on a test. He vowed to never relive that nightmare. That's easy for you to say. Kigo whined with comical tears running down his face while pointing at him accusingly. You study all the time, you nerd. He wasn't exactly wrong, he does study a lot, and that was his excuse when is needed to make a getaway from Kigo when he trains his power. Why don't you help me study, buddy? He cried out, flinging himself at Ichigo, who punched him the face. Study on your own, you idiot. He growled out. High school was especially rough on him. People picked fights with him, most of his teachers stigmatized him, even with good grades they just seemed to hate him. The only reason it's known that he does good in school is because his teacher Oki-sensei doesn't discriminate and congratulates him on his schoolwork in front of everyone as she did with everyone. It did help his image a little, but some teachers still hated his reputation and attitude. Now where is he? He asked himself. As he entered the hall, all the students in his grade gathering around a bulletin to see their ranking. Third in the class. Good job, Orihime. He heard Tatsuki say, patting her friend on the head and making her giggle. Tatsuki saw Ichigo coming up before turning away, either in anger or shame, he did not know. Orihime turned to see their mutual crush before pouting angrily at him. She took Tatsuki by the arm and walked away, surprising everyone. I don't think I've ever seen Orihime angry before. The common students began gossiping about what could possibly have upset the normally bubbly girl they all know and loved. Ichigo felt terrible, all those feeling from that night rushing back at him in full force. So far no one was blaming him, so the knowledge of them dating probably didn't get out. Or Chad did something to quell the talks. At the moment, not his problem. He took the time to look at the class ranking, where he was 5th in the grade. Ryukin made the requirement for the cousins to be in the top 10 if they wanted their Quincy training. It was a good motivator. He glared at one name in particular before finally sensing him. He gave a quick glance to Chad, who seemed to understand what he wanted, before slinking off to meet the Quincy. On the rooftop. DMN it. The bespectacled teen cursed. It wasn't his grades he was angry about, nor any mishaps in his sewing. The object of his ire were the 2 small crosses in his hand. One silver while the other was black, but both had a skull insignia. These were the new Quincy crosses, created by Urahara to exorcise the hollows instead of destroying the souls outright. With them he could do as the Quincy, as his grandfather wanted. There was just one problem. I know he said it would require more fine control, but this is ridiculous. The new bows took his own Ryatsu as well as the ambient ratio around them to work. He was not used to the method and was training it as much as he could. Why was he angry? Yuryu. He forgot to tell his cousin and he dropped a few places while he himself was in 2nd place for the grade. Something you forget to tell me, cousin? Ichigo growled at his dark-haired relative, neither dropping their glare at the other. Unfortunately, yes. He said before tossing his cousin the black cross. Urahara finally finished my gear and I had to test mine out. Ichigo caught the cross with ease before examining it for himself. It needs you to draw on your own Ryatsu and the surrounding Reisher to function. Pushing and pulling as he said. Ichigo slipped his new cross on his wrist before focusing. He managed to get a cloud of Ryatsu perpendicular to his hand before letting it dissipate. Yikes! Ichigo panted as the effort pushed him mentally. That is rough. This was going to require remastering Quincy arts all over again. So if you have the ability, why didn't you reveal yourself to Rukia? Yuryu readjusted his glasses, having the light mask his eyes. That's because. There was a pause between the two. I couldn't think of a cool entrance. He said dramatically, trying to make it sound more impressive than it was. Ichigo's response was to give his cousin a violent noogie. My rank dropped 3 places because of this Shinigami crap. He growled while Yuryu tried to escape his torture. I didn't need these pointless chases if there wasn't a hollow. Oh. I'm sorry. He tried to plead for forgiveness. He was still grateful for his cousin. If it wasn't for him, he'd probably be an antisocial loner. Ichigo stopped when they sensed another hollow. Let me. Yuryu suggested after Ichigo let him go. Is Kuchiki-san going to be a problem here? He asked, walking to an opening in the fence as a hollow appeared in the distance. Chad should be keeping her busy. Ichigo answered as Yuryu summoned his new spirit bow. It had a black body with a bright blue aura. Should be fine then. Yuryu said as he took aim. It was a millipede-like hollow, searching around for a meal. He shot a flying black arrow straight through the neck of the monster and making it disintegrate, particles flying into the air as it faded. Kisuke did a fine job with that. Ichigo said, more impressed with Kisuke than his cousin for a skill he already had. Yeah, but I can't make a solid bow anymore. Yuryu informed as he shook his hand. It's going to take forever to get to that level again. You can worry about that after meeting Rukia. Ichigo said, getting ready to leave. Tonight. Just appear out of the shadows or something. He left his cousin alone. Tonight, huh? He said, thinking back on their cover story. It wasn't exactly wrong, but he also didn't want to lie about his family connection either. Later that night in some random street. Again. Rukia growled as they ended up with another order but no hollow to show for it again. Is this thing busted? She looked at her soul pager in anger, trying to figure it out. Ichigo remained silent as he dragged his body out and went back inside, patiently waiting for the Quincy to arrive. And why are you so quiet about this? She yelled at her partner accusingly. You were so mad earlier, so why are you silent now? Impatient, isn't she? Yuryu stated, coming out of the shadows finally. He wore a form-fitting white uniform that seemed like a mix between Chinese origin and Catholic robes. How unprofessional of a soul reaper. He stopped before the two. Good evening. Ichigo. Kuchiki-san. Rukia was about to ask before Ichigo spoke first. Yuryu Ishida. Speaking coldly to his cousin, trying to match his tone. They both sensed another hollow and Yuryu quickly dispatched it while Rukia responded to her pager. Just as quickly as it appeared, it was dead. Rukia was watching the Quincy in shock, wondering what new development this was. You see Kuchiki-san. I am Dash, he was about to tell her before Ichigo got behind him and pulled his outer robe over his head and tied it shut, trapping both the Quincy's arms. His name's Yuryu Ishida. Ichigo told Rukia while his cousin struggled to free himself. Like Chad, he's also an empowered human. He's a Quincy. Yuryu finally freed himself of his confinements and glared at the hybrid. I thought you said I could make an entrance. He growled through his teeth. And you did. Ichigo affirmed. I never said I wouldn't ruin it. Payback for not telling me earlier. Why weren't you paying attention? I had tests to study for. The two bickered while Rukia was looking completely lost. Excuse me. She yelled before the two teens could start exchanging blows. Can I get an explanation? Sure. Ichigo said. We met when we were kids. We trained together for years. Yuryu continued. We promised to fight together. We've been close ever since. Aside from the occasional slip-ups. They finished together before attempting to return to their childish squabble. Rukia still had questions. But, what's a Quincy? She asked the boys. What do we look like? Ichigo scoffed. Your personal encyclopedia. Yuryu said condescendingly. Ichigo then began talking about the irritations he's dealt with since Rukia showed up in his life, making his cousin sympathize. Shortly after that, Yuryu and Ryukin were invited to dinner after Yuzu called Ichigo asking if he was going to have dinner. The rest of the day passed by without Rukia getting any answers from the two, leaving her one choice. The next day at Urahara's shop. The Quincy and the Ishidas Tensai was setting out the tea for the three of them as Rukia tried to get information. Ichigo isn't telling you? Urahara teased the noble. Yes. She responded, taking a sip of her tea. He said he'd be my partner, but he wouldn't say anything about them other than he and Ishida were friends. Not surprising. The Shinigami let Yuryu's grandfather die years ago. He said, surprising Rukia. The Quincy were a clan of spiritually aware humans who specialized in destroying Hollow's complete destruction, not cleansing them at all. Rukia paid rapt attention to the former captain as he explained a lost history most did not know. The Shinigami tried to convince them to leave the business of Hollows to them, but the Quincy refused and they had to be all but wiped out. The Quincy threatened the balance of souls that the Soul Reapers worked to maintain, and they did this massacre as a last resort about 200 years ago. The survivors tried to live in peace while some still advocated an alliance of sorts. Soken Ishida was the last Quincy elder to support that idea. Through Yuryu and Ichigo, however, that dream could become reality. He told his favored customer about the new Quincy devices he augmented to allow the Quincy to act as true allies to the Shinigami instead of a danger to the whole world. Ichigo was probably protecting his friend, waiting for you to see him in a better light. Rukia had to question what she knew about Soul Society again if such things happened. A kind innocent man, who wanted nothing more than to help, left to die because of the inaction of the Soul Reapers. Refusing allies because of a grudge they tried to end. What was going on in her life? This is all so strange. She whispered, shaking from all the weariness. You're a new Soul Reaper, just out of the academy. Urahara told the petite girl. This is heavy, classified stuff. Just then, Rukia's pager went off. She picked it up and was frozen in terror. What is this? Karakura Hospital rooftop. Your dad was surprisingly lax about the test scores. Ichigo said to his cousin as they studied and practiced their archery skills. Yuryu was shooting the target bullseye while Ichigo was going over notes. They would switch after emptying the quiver. As long as we're in the top 10, he's fine with us. Yuryu said before shooting his intended target flawlessly again. Just as Yuryu prepared to make another shot, Ichigo felt something strange in the air. Barely a tenth of a second later they sensed a swarm of hollows appear in the city. Hundreds of them. Yuryu, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Despite my best wishes, I unfortunately am. The air was soon filled with hundreds of ghostly roars, crying out in hunger. Fighting together. Karakura Hospital rooftop. It was like something from a nightmare. Every passing second brought more and more of those mindless beasts. Tens turned to hundreds and hundreds to thousands as they continued to pour through holes in dimensional space, driven by their hunger to seek and devour. From partially humanoid to completely beastly and monstrous, each wearing masks that one would see in nightmares. The cousins could only stare in horror as they descended on the city. As they finally began to register what was happening, they began to panic. Oh God! Ichigo managed to finally speak. Yuzu. Karen. His worry immediately going to his sisters, still young, still fresh, still weak. An appetizing treat for a hungry hollow should one find them. We have to go get them. He was about to run off before Yuryu held him back. Ichigo! He yelled out, barely restraining himself from rushing off to save the twins. I'm just as worried about them as you are, but you have to stay calm. Always the thinker, always the planner, always looking out for his hot-headed brother in arms. You are still in your human body, and unless you can control your bow immaculately, you can only use Kido, and those incantations take quite some time. Where is Rukia? They had to get him in spirit form and fast. He was stronger then, more powerful. Ichigo took a few deep breaths to calm himself and to focus on his wayward partner. She just left Urahara's, he said as he noticed her speed, and she's already in spirit form. They sighed in frustration. They had to ensure that Ichigo's body was safe, and Urahara's shop was quite the distance away. Time was not on their side at all. What's really bothering me is who used the hollow bait. This surprised Yuryu, as both he and his father disposed of all the hollow bait they had years ago. Did Aizen get the formula, or was the Vandenrake making a move? Our enemies are probably trying to test us. See how strong we are. He hypothesized. Which means we can't afford to go all out. But this still exposes us. Ichigo said as he remembered a few others. Chad and Rukia can handle themselves, Cons with Karen and Yuzu, and I can only hope they'll ignore Tatsuki and Orihime. He had faith in his allies in battle, and Kon was designed to bodyguard the girls in that body, but Orihime and Tatsuki had greater Ryatsu than most people, so there was still a chance they could be targeted. The two warriors felt trapped. No matter what, there was loss on their end. Trying to figure out the best plan, left the boys paralyzed. This was their first real battle. Not some random weak and stupid hollows that are spread apart, but a veritable army coming against them. They realized that all the training they did nothing to account for the very real fact that they might fail this day. Standing around moping is not going to help anyone. A familiar firm and deep voice. The boys turned to see their Quincy teacher stride out to join the boys in witnessing the terror before them. Yes, if you fight you will give your enemies the chance to study you, to learn your strengths and weaknesses. He said, voicing one side of their dilemma. However, you can just stand back and let this carnage happen. He said, as fact. Not possibility, fact. Doing so will keep you both under the radar for some more time. But such an act will lead to many injuries and death to the living and the dead. He readjusted his glasses as his two students turned to face him. None of us trained you to second-guess yourselves. Yes, your enemies will learn valuable information on you, but this will teach you something about yourselves as well. He glared at the boys, making them feel the weight of the next decision they would have to make. Will you be cowards? Or will you fight? Neither team moved for seconds that passed like hours. Suddenly the two threw themselves over the side of the building, skating away on a flow of erasure. He smiled in satisfaction. Those two will be your downfall, Yawatch. He thought as they disappeared. They've gotten much faster. He turned and began preparations for the influx of new patients he would be having. With Yuryu and Ichigo. So what's the plan you're going for? Yuryu asked as he followed his cousin, flying through the air on the flow beneath their feet. Ichigo had general ideas, Yuryu did the fine-tuning. We're heading to Karen and Yuzu. Ichigo replied as they skirted past some hollows, occasionally striking out with fists or small-scale Kido. Khan's current body is strong, but mine is better. He'll take them and my body back home so we can focus on the fighting. Ichigo felt his phone vibrating in his pocket, despite the pressure and friction pressing on him. He looked at the screen, slowing down only slightly to prevent destroying the small device. It had only one message from Kisuke. Level 1 restraints, lifted. Ichigo was just given permission to use higher-level Kido and attacks. He knew just the set to use for this. With Chad in the market district. This isn't good. The muscle-bound giant thought as he sensed all the hollows pour in like rain in a storm. Despite the coming battles he would face, Chad remained very calm about his situation. Ichigo and Yuryu are already on the move. If I had to guess, they're going to Yuzu and Karen. He guessed, knowing his best friend's protective brotherly instinct would push in to defend his precious sisters and Yuryu would watch his back. Guess it's up to me then. He decided as a group of hollows surrounded him. What a tasty-looking soul you are. He heard them speak amongst themselves. A large pale purple one with a mask like swirling wind currents reached out to crush him in its massive hands. Sato grabbed onto the hollow's hand, turned, and threw it into one of its comrades around him. The explosion of dust and debris scared what remaining bystanders there were into running for their lives. While the hollows themselves tried to figure out what had happened, Chad jumped up to one of them with his empowered arm and smashed the beast's mask, killing it without a blast of rapier. You want me? He asked, glaring at the hollows as they managed to get back on their feet. Come and get me. He growled before turning and running away. The hollows just stared in confusion before Chad flared his Ryatsu, making them act on instinct to catch their prey. I have to get to a safe place to fight. He thought as he remembered what Yoruchi and Urahara told him. Your fists have a lot of power in them, Sato. He heard the voice of the shopkeeper repeat in his mind as he stopped running once he reached the empty park. Great heavy attacks, but you must be careful using it in the city. One of the hollows reached out to grab him and Chad caught its hands in his own before tearing its arms off and slamming his head into the hollow's mask, crushing it. All it takes is one mistake. Yoruchi's voice rang out in his ears as he fired a shot at another hollow, destroying its head. And you could cause great damage to a lot of innocent people. He jumped onto another hollow's beastly mask and jumped off with enough force to shatter the white bony structure. So you should learn to control the amount of power you put into it. He charged up his arm again, making it glow in bright light, before shooting his fist out rapidly, blasting out a rain of his rapier blasts like a machine gun. The ground beneath became littered in small craters and the dissolving bodies of hollows unfortunate enough to get caught in the blast. He landed on the ground just in time for more to show up, drawn in by his still flaring Ryatsu. Ichigo, I'll draw as many as I can to me. He thought to himself, possibly trying to send a message to his friend. Get to your sisters, then come here. I'll hold out till you show up. He charged at the next hollow, ready to continue the long fight ahead. Unaware of the growing tear in the sky. Back at Karakura High. Tatsuki was still thinking about what Ichigo said to her. She was a normal girl. She was always more into guy things, standing out from the girly girls but never fully one of the guys. Compared to Ichigo, her boyfriend she's sharing with Orihime, she's normal. A normal human with nothing to prove otherwise than seeing spirits. Sure, she was stronger, faster, and more skilled, but only because she was being taught by Yoruchi. She wanted to prove him wrong, that she's not some helpless girl. But how? Tatsuki. Breaks over. She heard a voice yell out inside of the karate club's room, telling her to return for her next match. She wanted to help him, help carry that burden he put on himself, but she remembered how she felt seeing her first hollow. She was afraid, frozen with unease. She put on a brave face with Ichigo because she refused to let him see her as weak. That same feeling she had now. Tatsuki. She turned to see Orihime, still around after her own club activities finished. After their date with Ichigo, they had a private talk over the phone and she told her about what happened with Ichigo. Orihime had that way with people, she could tell when something was wrong and no one could hide it from her. That was also the first time she ever seemed mad at anyone. She never raised her voice and never said a mean thing, until that day. What is it, Orihime? She asked her oldest friend before they heard glass breaking. They rushed to find the source, but there was nothing. Just broken glass and people arguing. They and a classmate named Chizuru ended up being the ones that had to clean up the mess. She kept complaining about having to help clean, while Tatsuki and Oriheim couldn't shake off the unease they were feeling. Why do I have to help? The perverted lesbian whined while she and Tatsuki swept up the dangerous shards of broken glass that littered the area. She received no response as Oriheim was watching the sky tear and Tatsuki was on guard. What is up with you two? Again nothing. Tatsuki. If Oriheim keeps spacing out, I'm going to give her a nice rubdown. She teased, knowing she'd react furiously to keep her from Oriheim. Chizuru. Tatsuki said as she got up, looking toward the open field. Why are you here? She had to get Chizuru and Oriheim out of there. Why don't you and Oriheim leave early? She tried, but the monster was impatient. There was an explosion of dust as it dropped down before them. A spider's body with large crab claws and a snarling mask was the beast's appearance. Oriheim, run! Tatsuki yelled out as she grabbed Chizuru and bolted. They managed to get Chizuru through the door and into relative safety, but the hollow shot out a mass of webs and barricaded the door, trapping Oriheim and Tatsuki alone with the hungry monster. All unaware of the more dangerous creature watching them. Tatsuki. Oriheim was terrified. Here they were, face to face with monsters people have trained for years to decades to prepare to fight these monsters. Ichigo was already fighting them and treated the beasts as an annoyance. What should we do? All Tatsuki could think of at that moment was how right Ichigo was. She saw Chad's arm and she watched Yuryu and she knew Ichigo's power. She had none of these. She kept hearing Ichigo's voice in her head, saying those words she hated. You're a normal girl. You're powerless. Over and over like a mantra chant of insanity. Not fast enough. Not strong enough. Fear became doubt, doubt in herself and her abilities. But doubt gave way to annoyance and annoyance gave way to anger. She growled as she clenched her fist, nails digging into her skin and drawing blood. Normal. Powerless. She shot herself forward like a bullet, charging headfirst at the monster that was set on eating them. Shut up. She growled in response, narrowly dodging a swipe from the hollow's claws. Shut up. She slammed her fist into the hollow's mask. Shut up. 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 She kept punching away at the hollow, Oriheim screaming at Tatsuki to run away while the beast tried to understand what was happening. This was still a fairly fresh hollow, not smart enough to recognize a growing threat as the girl continued to punch away at it, or was there something else about it? Yes, I'm normal. I want to hang out with my friends, worry about my grades, and get a little lovey-dovey with my boyfriend. She raged, her knuckles bleeding from punching the hollow's bony skull with no protection. And yes, I'm powerless. I don't shoot things out of my hands like Chad and Yuryu. She felt a fire build up inside of her, something she felt after a brutal spar against her teacher, Yoruchi. But I. She punched it again, cracking the mask. I am not. Another punch, cracking it further. Helpless. She threw a final punch at the hollow, covering it in a burst of fire. The air was filled with its sudden death cries as it dissolved into nothingness. Tatsuki. She couldn't hear Oriheim's voice. She did it. By some miracle she actually did it. She killed a hollow. Tatsuki. She wasn't naive enough to think that this meant she was anywhere near to equal foot to Ichigo, but this was a first step. Now she had to train it and survive the day. Tatsuki. She finally heard her ditzy friend call out her name. Tatsuki. Oriheim wrapped her arms around her tired friend and began crying, letting go of all of her worry and relief. Can you lighten up, Oriheim? Tatsuki groaned out, the rage and adrenaline seeping out of her as her exhaustion took over. My arms are killing me. She didn't really care. Oriheim was safe, they were safe. Looks like I made the right decision. They heard a withered, vile voice speak out. I felt that girl's strength and wanted to see if she was a threat. The two friends looked to see some strange tentacled hollow, floating above them and watching them, hungrily. Now that she's too tired to fight, this will be easy. The hollow flared out her tendrils and shot things out of her forehead, breaking through the glass with ease. Seconds later Orihime and Tatsuki were surrounded by the other students, each one with a seed sticking out of their bodies. "Now die and feed me your souls," she screeched before laughing. Tatsuki could only glare at the hollow in rage. "Orihime!" she called out to her friend, getting between her and the hollow as the zombified students closed in. "Run! I'll hold them off," she said, despite the feeling that she broke her hands. "Don't be crazy, Tatsuki," Orihime pleaded with her friend. "I can't just abandon you." "But you can't fight either, can you?" Tatsuki stated. She could feel Orihime's power for herself, and if anger brought out hers it might just help Orihime. "Just run. You'll only slow me down." Orihime was staring at Tatsuki in shock. Her best friend just said she's useless. Is this what she felt when Ichigo told her that? Is Tatsuki really going to push her away? That being said, I'm not sure how long I'll last, Tatsuki said as the possessed mob got closer and closer. "Tatsuki!" There was a yelling. They all looked up and saw the red-headed lesbian yelling out to them. "After you pass out, I'll teach Orihime all sorts of naughty things," she yelled out in a perverted tone. Tatsuki forgot about her immediate danger and vented her annoyance, throwing rocks and knocking out the zombies that got too close. "That should do it. Good luck, you mannish freak," she whispered from behind her cover as Tatsuki kept throwing things. "Chizuru! You keep your grubby hands off Orihime. You hear me?" she yelled at the lesbian while the hollow was shocked that it was being ignored. "Quit ignoring me!" It howled as it pelted Tatsuki with her seeds, striking her in her thigh, shoulder, and stomach. "You're supposed to be wallowing in fear and hopelessness. How dare you ruin my fun?" it cried out indignantly. "The question now is to how to make you pay for this." Tatsuki glared at the monster before her, filled with defiance to the creature. "Why don't you strip naked and let these boys have their dash?" the hollow was interrupted. Again as Tatsuki slammed her free fist into her shoulder, just below the sprout on her body. The result caused another blast of fire to pass through her and destroy the hollow seeds. She also broke her bones in the process, but she made her point. She refused to let that freak have its way. "Like I told so many others," Tatsuki said, glaring at the hollow, making it worry. "I will crush anyone who hurts my friends." Orihime watched her best friend and remembered each time Tatsuki helped her, how everyone else helped her when she couldn't help herself. She relied on her brother, she relied on Tatsuki, she relies on Ichigo, but no one relies on her. She doesn't have anything to offer her friends. She hates that, and she's sick of it. "Well, maybe I want to protect you once in a while, Tatsuki." Everyone was now watching the Auburn princess stand up. "I'm tired of always being protected. I'm tired of always having to hide behind you. How about I do the protecting for once?" The hollow became livid. "I said, stop ignoring me." It shot off more of its seeds before a flash and whirlwind appeared. By the time the dust settled, something cut through one of its tentacles and there was a glowing triangular shield. "I'm talking to my friend," she growled, glaring at the monster that attacked them. "Shut up, you disgusting freak." Tatsuki was surprised by the level of aggression Orihime showed. Earlier she was just passive with Ichigo, but this was something else. She could only stare at Orihime like she was a completely different person. Orihime turned back to fight her and was about to continue. "Now I'm dash." "Orihime, where did that shield come from?" Tatsuki asked, directing Orihime's attention to the glowing barrier. There was a silent pause as Orihime seemed to finally notice it. "Oh wow!" she exclaimed in childlike wonder as the points separated and joined their flying siblings. "What are they? How should I know?" Tatsuki asked as the sprites flew around them. Of course you wouldn't know. One rough voice spoke rudely. We are Oriheim's powers after all. A more gentle one said. A pale green sprite landed on her shoulder before revealing the small fairy girl inside. Hi Oriheim. She cheered happily as the rest revealed themselves, each dressed in a variety of ways. Ah! Oriheim cried out, realizing something. You're the Shun Rika. Aren't you? She remembered, a long time ago when a certain strawberry told her to make a wish on her precious present, she dreamed. In that dream, there was a field of flowers inhabited by 6 fairies. They told her they were watching over her, that they were with her, that they would protect her. Shun-o. I am. Tsubaki. Bagan. Lily. Hinajuku. She cheered, wanting to hold each one to her chest after not seeing them for so long. It's so good to see you all again. Tatsuki could only watch in confusion. Wait, if you were with Oriheim all this time then where were you? She asked the flying spirits. That's easy. Shun-o chirped, pointing at the now missing hairpins on Oriheim's head. We manifest ourselves from her hairpins. There was another pause of silence as Tatsuki digested the information. No expressions changed in this time. So magic wish-granting hairpins? Tatsuki summarized from a long-past conversation. Yep. Wish-granting hairpins. Shun-o chirped. Oriheim was ecstatic. Yay! Wish-granting hairpins. She yelled, throwing her arms around her old friend. The hollow grew more and more furious. I will dash. Koten Zanshuan, I reject. Oriheim said with a cheery smile that felt surprisingly dark as Tsubaki silently split the monster in half that his master was pointing at. She turned to the monster with that same dark smile as she said in a chillingly sweet tone. Don't ruin the moment. The hollow faded into nothingness shortly after. Tatsuki felt a newfound respect and fear for her friend. But mostly, she was glad that Oriheim was safe, and now she could prove Ichigo wrong. She winced as the pain came back, which Oriheim noticed. Soten Kiss-hun, I reject. She said, enveloping Tatsuki in a glowing shield and undoing the damage done. Now that's useful. Tatsuki admitted, testing her arms a little. She noticed Oriheim pouting at her and she knew what the girl wanted. Tatsuki sighed with a smile. I'm sore dash, she couldn't say as Oriheim immediately hugged her friend fiercely. Now I can help protect you. Oriheim said, crying in joy a little. Tatsuki returned the hug in earnest. And we can both help Ichigo. If that's the way you feel then you should get moving. The girls heard a familiar voice yell out to them. They looked up to see Yoruchi walking toward the girls with a proud smile. You did good for your first time, but this is nothing for beginners like yourselves. She said pointing at the growing swarm as the hollows seemed to start converging on 2 places. If you really want to help, then drink these. She said before tossing the girls several water bottles. Those will help replenish your rature. And Tatsuki, here. She handed her student a pair of armored gauntlets. Those should help you with those thick skulls, and you should be able to shoot fireballs if Kisuke did everything right. The girls looked excited at the prospect of proving themselves to their boyfriend. Let's do this. They cheered before attempting to drink their own refreshments. But this isn't a game. Yoruchi said, gravely seriously. You have to be very careful out there. The girls looked at the noble with a sense of recognition of the danger they recently faced. If you slip, you could die, or get someone else hurt. Are you ready to risk that? She asked, making the girls question their resolve. They thought about how Ichigo must be out there, putting his life on the line to fight this infestation, and here they were, celebrating beating 1 hollow each. They swore to help Ichigo, and that's what they were going to do. They chugged their drinks fearlessly and felt themselves go back to 100%. Yoruchi smiled. Get to the park. We're watching your back. The girls ran off without another word. They should make things interesting. Someone said, finally making their presence known. Kisuke is already working on thinning the herd where he goes. And you guys? Yoruchi asked her companion. Staying under the radar. And helping where we can. He said, lazily. Ichigo has grown since the last time we've seen him. Maybe he can bring that Chad fella next time. We might be able to help him. He said as they continued to watch the gathering swarm and the growing tear in the sky. Back with Chad. He kept crushing skulls, blasting them to nothing, and overpowering dozens of hollows with no rest. The monsters only seemed to get stronger as more came up, and more intelligent. Chad was starting to feel the strain, the area around him was being torn apart by his blasts and the hollows' attacks. This is bad. He thought to himself, trying to reassess the situation. A hollow tried to swipe at him but he caught it and threw the corrupted soul around, smashing into other hollows before letting go, letting the force take them away. I'm getting closer and closer to my limit. A hollow with a bull mask charged at him, making Chad struggle against keeping the beast at bay. With a defiant roar, he headbutted the creature before slamming his empowered fist into its skull, wiping out several more hollows in the process. I could really use some help about now. He thought, as the horde showed no sign of decreasing. He was so focused on standing his ground, he did not notice the petite Shinigami's chant. Wrath of your claws. He heard the familiar voice and chant just in time to duck. Heido number 33. Sokatsui. Rukia yelled as a torrent of blue fire blasted from her hands, clearing a number of hollows. She, again, cursed her weakness. If Ichigo didn't drain her powers, she could use her Shirkai to help out tremendously. But she knew that would be insane in this situation. Where did all these hollows come from? They never did something like this before. Sado. You all right? She asked her ally. I'm grateful for the extra room to breathe, Rukia. He said getting up. Any idea what that tear in the sky is? He asked punching another hollow into oblivion. If I had to guess. She grunted, dodging hollows swinging at her while she slashed them. I'm not sure I want to be right. Where's Ichigo? She asked. At his sister's school. Chad grunting, holding another monster at bay. He wants to make sure they're safe. He smashed the hollow's skull before slamming his foot on another one. Can he hurry up? She asked, cleaving through another hollow. There is nothing good beyond that tear. She yelled out as the duo kept the hollows at bay. Karen and Yuzu. The twins waited, huddled close together behind the protection of the barrier Yuzu acted between themselves and the hollows drawn to them. A barrier designed to keep hollows out, but others could pass through. Karen took this chance to help out their mod soul bodyguard with Heido blasts. Ye Lord! Mask of blood and flesh, all creation, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Inferno and pandemonium, the sea barrier surges, march on to the south. Heido number 31. Shikaho. She yelled as a ball of red flames shot from her hand like a cannon, disintegrating another hollow while Kon continued to tear through the masses. He went through numerous modifications after he joined the Kurosaki family, particularly when it came to protecting the twins. Kon currently was a tall, lean, and ripped man-lion, with razor-sharp claws and strength to rival Chad's. The downside of this was that it only works when the girls were in immediate danger. Karen! Yuzu cried, trying to maintain the barrier as some hollows banged against it before being pushed back. Where's Ichinii? Karen kept shooting off Kido blasts while trying to keep her sister calm. He'll be here. She yelled out, having full faith in her brother. Ichinii promised to protect us, remember? She asked, trying to reassure herself as much as her sister. Suddenly she felt herself and her sister being pulled together as Kon seemed to grab them, just as he reverted back to that lion plushie. She locked eyes with Yuzu's in terror as a flash of glowing silver dropped in front of them directly at Khan's head. A silver rod strikes the five-fingered stone bed. Grits. They heard before being enveloped in darkness. They listened to the angered roars of the hollows before they heard the unmistakable tone of their protective brother. Ye Lord! Mask of flesh and bone, flutter of wings, ye who bears the name of man. Truth and temperance, upon this sinless wall of dreams unleash but slightly the wrath of your claws. Heido number 33. Sokatsui. They could feel the heat from Ichigo's Kido spell through the Quincy barrier only one other person could have done. The seal fell apart and before them stood the ones they were waiting for. Ichi and I. Yuryu and I. They twins cried as they ran to their brother and cousin. Ichigo knelt down to better hug his precious sisters while Yuryu opted for a reassuring pat on the head. All the while ignoring the scorched schoolyard behind them. You two did great to hold out for this long. Ichigo said, giving them a congratulatory smile with the intent of calming their nerves. But you should head home and let us handle the rest. Yuryu said as Ichigo extracted the soul pill to swallow. Now that he was in soul form, it was time to clear out the Hollows. Khan, now in Ichigo's body, grabbed the girls and made his way for their home. You should have let Yuzu heal your hand a little. Ichigo said as Yuryu looked at his bleeding hand. The rate of the Hollows were increasing and his new bow was more than a little taxing on him. You'll just have to pick up the slack then. Yuryu said while readjusting his glasses. Seems fitting since all you did was run while I covered you. Don't worry. Ichigo turned to his ally, One Eye Black and Gold. There will be no rest till they're all dead. He said before they disappeared in a burst of speed, their destination obvious. The empty park. The fight continued as the two defenders became more and more exhausted. Chad was breathing rather heavily with a few notable injuries on him, testing his endurance for the first time in a long time for the man. Rukia was faring no better as she did not have the same physical limit as her ally and her already weakened state wasn't leaving her too much room for error. The next wave was about to commence when they heard backup arrive. Koden Zanshuan I reject. Soten Kishan I reject. Orihime yelled out as her healing shield enveloped her two friends, fixing their injuries, while Tatsuki was riding on top of Tsubaki's shield. Once she got close enough she jumped off the black sprite and began shooting fireballs at various hollows, each one burning away the corrupted soul. After Tatsuki disembarked, Tsubaki continued his attack and cleaved through many hollows as well. Looks like we showed up just in time. Tatsuki said, standing to her full height after landing. Next to her allies. Orihime sat above them on her defensive shield and sitting in a meditative pose, trying to focus her energies on the battle. Here, drink these. They should replenish your rature. They gratefully took the drinks as the new arrivals held off the swarm for a bit. After consuming the potions, Chad fired multiple rapid blasts to the hollows while Rukia shot out more Kido spells. Then a sudden burst of blue flames erupted in the distance. Ichigo's coming. Chad said casually, greatly relieved that his friend is finally ready. TCH. It's about time. Tatsuki said, planning on giving her boyfriend the tongue lashing of a lifetime. Whether verbal or physical was up for debate. How long before he gets here? Rukia asked before being pushed to the ground by Sado. Heido #Okasen. She heard as a massive blast of yellow energy obliterated many of the hollows, removing their forces by half. They looked up to see Ichigo shrinking his Zanpakuto back to the normal large katana he usually wields, smoke coming off his blade from the Kido spell. Next to him was Yuryu, still bandaging up his hand. You guys alright? He asked, resting his blade on his shoulder. They seem fine, Ichigo. Yuryu said, preparing his bow for another onslaught. Though it seems you owe Arisawa-san and Inoue-san a couple of apologies. Ichigo noticed his girlfriends among the fighters. Guess I do. But before that, he lifted his blade and swung two arcs with energy blasting off the edge. We're going to kill every hollow here. he said before flaring his Ryatsu, making every hollow quiver in primal fear as an apex predator appeared before them. Before they could flee, a barrage of black arrows found their way into masks and bodies. Chad smirked and continued to fire multiple blasts from his fist to the densest groups of hollows. Tatsuki and Rukia swerved through the beasts, striking them down with sword swings and blasts of fire. Yuryu joined Orihime atop of her perch and struck down the beasts from a safe distance, and Ichigo cut down swaths of hollows down with every swing. That's when they finally noticed the tear finally opened, and with it the creature Rukia feared. The hollows sang a macabre song of praise to the titanic hollow coming. The Minos Grande. Ichigo. Yuryu asked his companion as the towering black hollow came forward with its freakish, long-nosed mask. Yeah. The hybrid responded, glaring at the behemoth. Where are the other Soul Reapers? The Quincy asked. Ichigo looked at Rukia, who looked at her cell and just shrugged. Apparently proving the Quincy's point about them being late. Ichigo surmised. That's disappointing. Yuryu said, walking toward the massive hollow. So, this is a Jillian. Biggest, dumbest, and weakest of the Minos Grande class. How droll. Ichigo said as he joined his cousin. You guys finish off the small fry. Ichigo shouted over his shoulder. We've got this. His friends were about to protest before hearing something like machine gun fire and the cracking of bones and skulls. Urahara's group had arrived. You heard him. The ex-captain said to the group. Let's get cracking. Closer to the Minos. So how should we do this? Ichigo asked his cousin as the Jillian devoured its surrounding hollows with a quick lash of its tongue. I can only think of one way. Ichigo looked at his cousin and saw a familiar glint in his eyes he hasn't seen for years. No. Ichigo quickly said. No way, not happening, we swore we would never do that again ever. He remembered the last time they did that particular thing, and he still regretted the decision to have done it. Ichigo, we don't have a choice. Yuryu pleaded while the towering Minos drew closer to them. You know DMN well why that technique is forbidden. Ichigo yelled at his cousin, refusing to yield. I will never forget, nor forgive myself, for that. Yuryu glared back, remembering an old shame. That's why I've agonized over how to fix it. That's why I suggest it now. You mean? Ichigo asked, feeling slightly hopeful. Yes, I've made it so it doesn't have that ridiculous name and pose anymore. The Quincy declared proudly. Perfect. Ichigo met his ally's enthusiasm. Yuryu held out his bow, horizontally. Grab on and manifest yours. Yuryu said. Ichigo took hold of the black bow and worked to manifest his own. The bow doubled in size and length while pulsating with power. Now turn. They turned their hands so that their bows were now perpendicular to the connecting base between them, forming an H. Pull back the arrow. Ichigo guessed as the reached to the middle and pulled back a massive harpoon of their mixed rapier. And now. Heilig Balliste. They shouted and let the missile loose. The top half of the Jillian was blasted away completely. The remains dissipated as the two Quincy reflected on their victory. Yeah, much better than last time. Ichigo admitted as their spirit weapon dissolved. Man, that was embarrassing. Indeed. Yuryu agreed. I'm glad my father never reminds me of it. Good for, oh crap. Ichigo said as he saw a bright red light grow bigger as it came straight for them. Acting as fast as he could, he shoved his cousin out of the way and brought up his blade to block the oncoming blast. Ichigo, what dash? Yuryu watched as Ichigo was forced back a few yards from the Zero attack. What? Was there another Minos? He traced the blast back to its origin and saw a larger hollow, smaller than the Jillian but still huge, serving as the source of the blast. He turned back to Ichigo, trying desperately to think of a way to help his family, when he saw something weird. Some of the deflected energy of the Zero was being absorbed into Ichigo's blade, glowing with red and blue racier as the blade turned black. "I've had enough," Ichigo yelled, pushing back against the blast. "Of this crap." The Zero ended and he swung his blade. For one day, the power he released overshadowed the Zero by a great margin, carving a trench in the ground with scorched earth and shattered glass. "Tell Urahara I'm skipping training tomorrow," Ichigo said to Yuryu before falling flat on his face. "Yeah." Yuryu responded, looking at the damage Ichigo caused, which surely killed whatever hollow that was. "I'll do that." Atop a tower, it watched the final scenes play out before it. The display was as impressive as His Majesty predicted. However, it was unexpected that the Ishida boy would so willingly side with the Shinigami. Ichigo was definitely the greater subject of interest, however. Mission objective, data retrieval complete. The white-clad, masked figure said. "Further research is recommended." It spoke, turning to a hole in the air. "Returning to Silburn," it said, light reflecting of the gold armor as it returned to a world of shadows. "Soul Society acts. Karakura High. Lunch time." It was the next day. All the damage was undone. Urahara and Yoruchi were planning the next training schedule and methods to account for Orihime and Tatsuki awakening to their own powers. Everything else went along as normal. The students went to school and the adults planned for what might come next. Ichigo had invited Yuryu to lunch, despite protests from Kigo. All Ichigo said was, "Deal with it." "Hey Kigo." Ichigo called his cheerful friend. "Tell us a story." Kigo felt honored. Despite his suspicions, lunch actually had a rather lively atmosphere. "Very well." Kigo yelled out happily. "Let me regale you with the tale dash. This should buy us the entire lunch PRD." Ichigo said, turning to Yuryu. "What happened?" Father confirmed that it was definitely hollow bait that was used. They went to Urahara's to rest and recover. After Yuryu's arms healed, he went to see if Ryukin had any information or guesses as to what had happened. Pretty potent for the amount of hollows, but still nothing to summon even one Minos Grande. So the Vandenrake was behind that incident. Ichigo summarized. But someone else capitalized on it. Indeed. They figured who had sent the Minos but didn't say anything. "What about you?" the Quincy asked after a moment of silence. "What do you mean?" Ichigo responded. "Your lady friend seemed more than a little angry at you after that whole powerless thing." "What happened?" Yuryu asked. Normally he wouldn't care, but Ichigo needed to focus, and if he was distracted by love troubles then they would both be in trouble. "Well. Flashback, last night. Tatsuki, I'm sore dash," Ichigo tried to say as he was punched in the face, again, by his irate girlfriend. When her powers awakened, Ichigo wanted to apologize for telling her she was weak. He couldn't get a word in edgewise because she just kept punching him every time he said something. "And just where do you get off saying that I'm the one that needs protecting when I've fought your battles for you when we were kids?" she yelled, getting her knuckles healed by Orihime. Ichigo was very tough in spirit form. He didn't even bleed while Tatsuki's knuckles got bruised before Orihime started healing. "You were the biggest crybaby. All Tatsuki wanted was to keep by your side, meanie Ichi." Orihime scolded with a pouty face. "You should know that better than anyone. And Orihime's very gentle, but that doesn't mean you should push her to the side simply because she couldn't fight." Tatsuki kept up. Isshin stopped by to pick up Ichigo while talking with Urahara about what happened earlier. "You better make this up to us in the biggest way, you JRK." Tatsuki glared as Ichigo realized that if he didn't say the right things, she would just punch him and hurt herself again. "Fine," he said, relenting to his angry ladies. "How shall I pay for my sins?" Tatsuki grabbed his Shihakusho and pulled him in close. "This for starters." She grabbed the back of his head and crushed their lips together, shocking everyone but Orihime, who took her turn once Tatsuki relented. Isshin was silently cheering the girls on in making his son a man while Urahara grabbed him a camera to commemorate the wonderful occasion. Tatsuki. They heard a familiar yell as the former head of the Shihoin clan stormed over to her students. What do you think you're doing? We were just kissing our boyfriend sensei. Tatsuki stammered. She was afraid of the aura Yoruichi displayed, knowing better than to anger her teacher. No, you aren't. Yoruichi stated, pushing them aside and getting in close with Ichigo, whose brain appeared to stop working. This is how you kiss. She smiled mischievously before opening Ichigo's mouth and giving him a deep kiss. Remember, she mumbled while continuing to explore Ichigo's mouth, don't force it. Be gentle and rub against his tongue a bit. She explained, letting the girls watch with massive blushes on their faces. Ichigo apparently came back to reality, but he couldn't fight against the more experienced woman's ministrations. She finally pulled back to let them both catch their breaths. Now you try. The two girls nodded dumbly and took his lips again. Soon they collapsed onto the floor, the girls in his lap with each taking turns. So what are we going to call this? Urahara asked as he and Isshin documented this moment of Ichigo's life. It was agreed among everyone to record the biggest moments of his and Yuryu's lives for when Masaki and Kane finally woke up, which Urahara predicted would be sometime that year. Ichigo's first makeout. Isshin giggled uncontrollably. Feeling some pride as a father for having a stud of a son, but also knowing he could milk this for quite some time. And we will not show Masaki. Ever. Smiling as his son finally gave in and returned them. Thinks she wants him to stay her baby boy? Urahara guessed. Maybe. Isshin admitted. Nothing else really important happened that day, other than Ichigo staying in a deep haze until the morning. Back to the present. Wow. Yuryu couldn't think of anything else to say. Yeah. Ichigo agreed, taking another bite of his bento lunch. I was going to destroy it, but that was some pretty good tips. Gotta keep the girls happy, Yuryu. Is that you or Zangetsu talking? The Quincy asked, knowing about Ichigo's Zanpakuto. Me, but just to shut him up. Ichigo answered. He was both ecstatic and said because I didn't try to cop a feel. Melons and butts. Big melons and nice butts. Right there. And you didn't go for it. His sword yelled at him. I am not forgiving you until you have CC with one of them. At least. Yeah. He says that because he's my hollow he's also my instincts. Ichigo said, trying to make conversation and ignore his sword spirit. Which is eat and mate. Primal instincts. Yuryu guessed. At least someone gets it. Zangetsu said. Replace eating with fighting and that sounds right. Ichigo said. But enough fun, you felt it too, right? The conversation took a more serious tone that even gave Kigo pause as the attention shifted before Chad brought Kigo back to his story. Yeah. 2 strong Ryatsu signatures appeared in the city this morning. Yuryu confirmed what his cousin was getting at. Dad was right. Soul Society finally sent someone. Any appearance. And sudden disappearance of a Minos Grande Hollow was enough to warrant the attention of the Godiai. Rukia has overstayed her role in Karakura, and they've come to get her. Same time, with Rukia. She sat in the tree, pensively staring into the sky in contemplation. She can't stay with Ichigo and the Kurosakis anymore. Isshin would definitely be put on trial for abandoning his post and Ichigo would be executed for taking her powers, not to mention the others that displayed their powers. She needed to get out of there for their own sakes, or the guilt would destroy her if anything happened to them because of her. Hey Rukia. She heard one of her classmates call out to her. Why don't you join us for lunch? It was the tanned one, Mihana, she recalled, with the other girls that Tatsuki and Orihime were friends with. She did so reluctantly, needing to continue her cover for the rest of the day before she made her move. They sat in a circle, calmly eating their meals, until Mihana brought up the number one gossip subject among teenage girls. "Hey, can I ask you something? Do you have a crush on Ichigo?" she asked, making Rukia spew out the juice she was drinking in response. "That's a maybe, but what is your relationship with him?" "Family friends, that's all," Tatsuki said quickly, going with the story Ichigo told her after they were done making out. "Mihana." The petite Michiru scolded her friend. "That's not something you just ask straight out like that." "I don't see why not, everyone wanted to ask that," she defended. "I didn't want to ask that," Michiru said, trying to steer the conversation away from the boy still was afraid of. "What's your problem with him anyway?" Tatsuki asked. "I just think he's scary looking is all," she said, embarrassed by such childish reasoning. "Sure, he looks intimidating, but he's also really gentle," Tatsuki said, smiling in remembrance of how he still held her tenderly that night she yelled at him. She just melted in those strong arms of his. "He's a real tender lover too," Orihime said, completely without shame. "He's such a great kisser after one lesson." Everyone else stared at the airhead in surprise, or shock in Chizuru's case, as Orihime blushed and giggled. "He tasted so good too." Tatsuki only let out an irritated sigh. "Yeah, I can vouch for that," Tatsuki admitted, though she suspected it was because of everyone swapping spit in that make-out. "You mean?" Ryo asked, being the first to come to her senses as the stoic one of the group. "Yep, Ichigo's our boyfriend," Tatsuki declared in defeat of having been exposed. Orihime just nodded, happily declaring her relationship with the strawberry. "And if Rukia wants in this club, she needs our permission," she said, surprising everyone again. Rukia couldn't help but imagine being one of Ichigo's girlfriends. She started thinking about it while Chizuru went crazy about her Hime being defiled, and if she couldn't have Orihime's first kiss, she'd settle for her virginity. Needless to say, everyone was trying to restrain Chizuru after that. Rukia just went off with her imagination about being Ichigo's lover. Complimenting her, praising her skills, holding her in his arms, kissing. "Looks like Kachiki's a bit of a perv," Mihana said, tickling Chizuru's stomach while Tatsuki had her in a headlock. Rukia wiped away the small bit of blood dripping from her nose as she tried to deny the notion. The day passed by simply after that. Night with Rukia. She had to run as far away as possible, keep them safe, don't let them share her burden. They were just there for shelter. She didn't care about any of them, not about the girls in high school, not the Kurosakis, and definitely not Ichigo. That's what she wanted to believe anyway. She liked them, she enjoyed her time with them, she didn't want them in danger. She knew Ichigo was powerful, but she still didn't want him to fight against Soul Society. She had one time been of the belief that he was equal to a captain, but he had only years of training and experience, where captains have centuries. It would be foolish of him to fight one. So she decided to run for their sake, but it hurt her to leave without a goodbye. "Am I getting too attached to this world?" she asked, unaware of the two bearing down on her. "Yes." She heard a familiar voice ring out. She stopped in her tracks to look at the man that's hunted her down. "You've broken quite a severe law, Rukia." He had a red ponytail and tribal tattoos, dressed as a soul reaper with a badge on his arm. "Renji?" she asked in disbelief, wondering if it was her old friend. "Renji Abarai?" He dropped down, swinging his blade as her, making her jump back and eject from her jigai. "At least you still have some powers, and you're not lax enough to drop your guard completely," he complimented, raising to his full height. "Now call him Rukia. The man that stole your powers." Rukia stayed in a guarded stance, ready to run if need be. "Why do you think I lost my powers to a human?" she defended. "Maybe I got badly injured and didn't want to shame Onie-sama by showing weakness." "If you're going with that argument, then you shouldn't lie," Renji retorted. "Should she, Captain Kachiki?" Rukia froze, feeling a very familiar, very ominous presence behind her. She turned to see him, wearing that scarf and hair ornaments, the Kuchiki clan head. Byakuya Onie-sama. She shuddered out, feeling terrified. Rukia. He said simply, watching his lieutenant attack her again as she dodged again. You know it's a crime to grant your powers to a human. Renji said. We have orders to execute him. He prepared for his next attack. Now call him Rukia. We'll capture you and he will die. So don't try to defend him. He settled into his stance. This time, my next attack will be serious. I have nothing to worry about then. Someone said before a rock the size of a baseball hit Renji in the face, breaking his visor and leaving a few cuts. Because if you needed to get serious against her in that state. He said, jumping down and revealing himself. Then I'll have no problems against you. Who the hell are you? Renji growled at the orange-haired man. Ichigo Kurosaki, he declared fearlessly, the human you're looking for. With Ichigo earlier. He was watching over the city, waiting silently, so still one would think him asleep. Already in his Shinigami state with 3 red ribbons in his hand, sensing and waiting. He felt Rukia run off, writing only a letter to let him know her plans, run as far as she could to spare his family the wrath of Soul Society. But he made a promise to help her and he keeps his word. Now here he was, with his spirit sense keeping track of the 3 other Soul Reapers and their spirit ribbons in hands to increase that accuracy. They finally met and he moved, disappeared from his perch in an instant when the first strike was made. He found them, 2 Shinigami, attacking Rukia, from the 6th division judging from that captain's Haori. He grabbed a rock and threw it at the attacking red head. Who the hell are you? He asked after Ichigo jumped down. Ichigo Kurosaki, the human you're looking for. He told the irate Renji. So you're the human that stole Rukia's powers? The Soul Reaper growled. By accident, yes. Ichigo admitted. Your point. Renji charged at Ichigo, swinging his Zanpakuto down with furious strike after strike. Ichigo turned his blade to a more normal size in order to throw off his opponent, should the need arise. You're dead. Renji growled, slamming his blade against Ichigo's in an attempt to kill the man who gave his best friend a death sentence. Byakuya watched in silence, analyzing this newcomer as his subordinate attacked. Years of experience let him know who was going to win this fight. This is the one that slew those Minos? He questioned as the two got into a blade lock. Renji, this battle was over before it even began. Here's what'll happen. Renji growled with an angry smirk, furious at the human before him and furious at his inability to try and save Rukia from her fate. Orders were orders. You'll die, Rukia gets her powers back, and then she'll dash. He was interrupted when Ichigo twisted the blades and moved his blade's hilt into Renji's chin, making him bite his tongue. Didn't anyone ever tell you to shut up in the middle of a fight? Ichigo asked, calm and collected as Renji grasped his mouth in pain. You bast dash. He was about to yell, but Ichigo was already in front of Byakuya. Hello, Captain. Ichigo greeted, almost politely, to the noble who looked at the human with a calm expression. Kuchiki. Captain Byakuya Kuchiki. He responded, still trying to read the young human. Thank you. Ichigo said before preparing to explain what happened. At least he's making an effort, it seems. Thought the noble, a little happy someone is trying to save his sister. Here's what happened. I've been spiritually aware since I was a kid. Apparently one of my ancestors was a Soul Reaper and I learned most of the important stuff from hand-me-down knowledge. He explained, not telling the full story. From there I prepared to fight Hollows to protect my friends and family. When I finally had the means, I used something that would absorb enough Raishir to allow me to change into a Shinigami. Rukia simply became a casualty and I've been helping her as a way to make up for her situation. He raised his blade to block another strike from Renji. Do you think this changes the situation? He roared in anger at a child humiliating him. He's a rude one. Wouldn't you say so? Ichigo asked the captain, not sparing a glance at his attacker. Quite. He agreed, giving Renji a look to tell him to back off. His lieutenant reluctantly obeyed. So that is the story. More or less. Ichigo admitted. What happens now? We'll still have to take Rukia in, with you as a witness. Byakuya answered. Maybe this will lighten her sentence. But I'll have to die. Ichigo said, knowing from what his teachers said about the judicial system of Soul Society. Very likely. He looked to Renji again, who took the signal to continue and made a swing. He stabbed through Ichigo's back before it disappeared and he received a hard kick to his side. Sorry, but I'm not in favor of dying just yet. He apologized. But I'll make a promise. Renji wins, I go willingly. He loses, I don't. He said, face to face with the captain. I have no doubt any more about the reports of you slaying those Minos Grande. Byakuya said, knowing this battle would end in Ichigo's victory. But Renji needed an attitude adjustment. Go ahead. I will not stand for this. Renji growled. Roar. Zabumaru. He said, wiping a hand over his blade, letting it transform into a six-segmented blade with sharp protrusions. The fight seemed on hold as both sides waited for the other to move. Rukia stood by her brother, knowing and accepting her fight, but silently hoping Ichigo would survive. Well? Renji finally growled. Ichigo took a second to glance between his own blade and Renji's. Guessing at what the lieutenant meant, Ichigo finally allowed his blade to grow to the matching size of Zabumaru. Happy? He asked, confused. Renji gawked in surprise, thinking that no Shirkai could be so worthless as to just be a size increase. Byakuya, on the other hand, re-evaluated the hybrid as he's shown a level of control only captains used. What scared the noble was the possibility was that Ichigo still didn't have full control of his Ryatsu. That's your Shirkai? Renji asked, again annoyed at the whelp. What? Ichigo responded dumbly. I don't have Shirkai. Renji couldn't believe this. Then you're a fool. He yelled, swinging his whip-like sword, Ichigo defending against the hard swings with visible effort. A fake Soul Reaper who doesn't even know his own Zanpakuto's name. He broke Ichigo's guard and made for the killing blow. The fool. The Kuchikis said at the same time. Rukia, in sorrow for her friend, and Byakuya, for his rash subordinate. Ichigo swung his blade, striking the top segment of Zabumaru, with the resulting shockwave breaking the connection to the hilt. Renji could only gawk as his blade fell apart in a mess, leaving only his hilt and blade base, before feeling himself getting stabbed. I said, I don't have Shirkai. Ichigo said, Zangetsu again in two forms with a katana in one hand and a tanto knife, buried in Renji's side. Because Zangetsu won't let me use Shirkai while in this state. Using Rukia's powers as a link to my own. He removing the dagger from Renji as the lieutenant dropped to his knees, blood spilling out of the hole in his side and staining his shihakuso. Your arrogance, is your undoing. He was about to swing again before stopping. Curiously, he reached up to his chest, directly above his soul chain and soul sleep, before feeling it soaked in his blood. He pulled open his robes to see the bleeding holes in his chest. Behind Renji was Byakuya, sheathing his blade. Humph. He grunted, more mad at himself for dropping his guard so easily. You won. He said simply, Ichigo dropping to his knees as his strength left him. But I was still free to act. He grabbed his subordinate and helped him to Rukia, who began healing her old friend. You will lose your powers, but you will survive. He declared to the boy, lying on the ground in a small pool of blood, unaware of the boy's healing. Live your life, die, then come to Soul Society. Byakuya said, opening the spirit gate to Soul Society. You may make a fine Soul Reaper after all. he said, preparing to walk through, with Renji and Rukia in tow. He barely took another step before turning, saying, Bakudo #Danku. Creating a transparent barrier between them and the rising Ichigo, feeling danger in the boy. Zangetsu. Ichigo yelled, unleashing a black and blue Getsuga against the barrier. Simply the result of activating a first transformation. Byakuya was in shock of the boy. How can he have this much power? He questioned before shoving his sister and lieutenant through the portal, shutting it, and dodging to avoid the blast that finally cracked through his Kido barrier. Mostly he was fine, his arm was charred and broken. Sorry. Zangetsu was pretty mad at you for that sneak attack. Ichigo said, slowly rising to his feet, looking pale and tired. But I should thank you. He told the captain, who was grasping his arm in pain. You severed my link to Rukia's powers, and finally balanced my own. The two injured Shinigami stood on their feet, watching the other closely. Neither of us are in any condition to keep fighting. So let me say this. 2 weeks. I'll be in Soul Society for 2 things. Saving Rukia, and I need to talk to the captain commander. Byakuya glared at the youth for his display of arrogance, but knew that he was in no condition to fight. Very well. He said, opening another Senkaman. 2 weeks it shall be. Leaving it at that while he needed to reach Squad 4 as soon as possible. Ichigo straightened up, feeling himself be restored as his regeneration finally kicked in. Finally. He shook himself to get the feeling back into his limbs. Now, how to break the news to everyone else. Preparations for the Soul Society. Ichigo's inner world. Well, that happened. Ichigo said, laying on one of the many towers that inhabited his world. After the fight with Renji and Byakuya, Ichigo made his way back to the Urahara Shoten. When he got there, however, he collapsed on the floor and brought himself to his inner world. By his side was the massive Kyber blade with cloth wrapping around the tang. No hilt, no guard, just a bare blade. I wonder what the explanation for this is. Well, it's still not a real Zanpakuto, if that's what you're wondering. He heard a warped speech that mimicked his own. He leaned forward to see a white copy of himself with black and gold eyes. Hey there, King. Zangetsu said, smiling a predatory grin. Ichigo raised an eyebrow in confusion. What is this anyway? He asked, sitting up across from his blade. I know it's comprised of Reisher, but I thought I couldn't do that whole release stuff. Your blade is manipulated by Reisher, given form through your hollow, and channels the purification of a soul reaper. Said the aged wisdom of his Quincy powers, appearing next to Ichigo. That's all the explanation I'm getting, isn't it? Ichigo asked. Best guess we're going with. Zangetsu said, helping his wielder to his feet. And it's not exactly Shirkai. It's you being able to use more of your power. Like faster healing and Zeros. The elder said. So why did I still pass out? Looking at his hollow side, who gave him a deadpanned look. Because you heal from injuries. Zangetsu explained. Damage remains and did lose a lot of blood before it finally kicked in. The limit of your healing is recreating major organs, so avoid any large blasts. We should also build up your endurance and damage tolerance. The elder Zangetsu said. However, before that, you need to talk with everyone. Storming Soul Society alone is insane. And making reservations for the party isn't exactly smart either. Zangetsu scolded. And speaking of a party, yours just showed up. He said before slapping Ichigo back into the outside. Urahara's shop. Several people occupied the quaint little store of the scientist, some old friends of his while others were his students. They sat and waited for Ichigo to recover from his confrontation with Byakuya. The children believed it a dirty move while the adults recognized the truth, a golden opportunity taken. Byakuya was a prideful man and it would not do to fail a mission, no matter the terms of the bet. Tatsuki glared at her boyfriend, wanting to chastise him for recklessness while Orihime wanted to help him recover. Yuryu recognized that the time was coming to meet the captain commander of the Shinigami and prepare for the incoming war with the Quincy. Chad, everyone was busy trying to convince him that it wasn't his fault for Ichigo's condition, that he did not break his vow to his friend. Another 10 minutes passed before the object of their discussion finally awoke. Note to self, need to dash, Ichigo started saying before taking a fist to his face. What were you thinking, you idiot? Tatsuki yelled as Yoruichi held her back, Orihime already healing Ichigo. Why would you go off against the enemy without any backup and expect to come out unscathed? Because I told Rukia I would talk to them. Ichigo yelled back, already coming back to full because of the healing shield. And I told them the mostly true story. He admitted. Considering the circumstances, you may have bought her more time. Isshin said, praising his son. Good job, son. And since we have a way into Soul Society already ready, we can focus on your training. Urahara said cheerfully. But if you thought we were rough before, a dark aura covered the room as Yoruichi gave a predatory glare and grin, then you have no idea what you're in for. A silent, grim, calm settled over the youths. That massive swarm of hollows was minor league, nothing to really write home about. Now, things were going to be for keeps. Soul Society meeting with the captains. There he was standing with his colleague captains of the Gotii, an awkward menagerie of individuals of various personalities and mindsets. He had delivered his report to the aged man in front of him, the leader of all Shinigami, Captain Commander Genryusai Yamamoto. Now Byakuya could only hope for a favorable outcome. I have no doubts that if execution could have been avoided, and I kept better control of my lieutenant, he would be standing here with us. Serving as a witness. Byakuya finished, returning to his place among the captains. He didn't mention the last thing that Ichigo had told him, something reserved only for the commander. He saw the one-eyed and battle-scarred barbarian that led the 11th squad bear a toothy grin in desire of the fight the boy promised, while the deranged scientist that commanded the 12th looked intrigued. He supposed that was better. The last thing he needed was that psychopath, Mayuri Kuratsuchi, ranting about how the Jigai was destroyed by the boy when his powers came back. This is a most curious development. Spoke Yamamoto, and a gravelly deep tone that rang with power and experience. This may require further investigation. If she did not truly break the laws, then the boy will have to be brought here to face charges. Some would deny the claims made and would push for the execution of Rukia, but the new report opened possibilities that they couldn't help but ponder on. A descendant of a Soul Reaper that managed to unlock his latent ability? This required more evidence. No one motioned to push for Rukia's death. Dismissed. He declared with a slam of his cane. The captains moved to return to their various divisions, however Byakuya stayed to speak with the commander. Sir, it's been a while since you were at the Kachiki compound, correct? Byakuya asked his aged superior. How about you take a break and have some tea with me? Yamamoto took a moment to consider. I think I may take you up on that offer, young man. Yamamoto decided, giving Kuchiki leave to start preparations. Well, aren't you the generous one? A sly tone mocked the noble Kuchiki. He turned to see a silver-haired fox-like man talking to him. Or maybe you're trying to butter him up to plea for your sister's freedom. Byakuya simply watched the taunting fox with contempt. Don't be absurd. He told his colleague. If Rukia is guilty, I'll kill her myself. My grandfather and the commander were old friends. It's only right to tend to that bond. He said before walking off. I have to make sure only the commander and those he deems trustworthy hear this. He thought to himself, remembering the resolve he saw in Ichigo. Like, he wasn't an enemy. Karakura High, last day of school. Ichigo felt sick. The day went by with nothing changing. The people still talked the same, acted the same, were the same, the only difference was a solitary empty desk in the classroom. The only evidence of Rukia Kuchiki ever existing in their lives. That and the memories of the spiritually aware. Now that classes were finally over, the team Ichigo had could finally move on to begin their training. Going to find Kuchiki-san, aren't you? Ichigo heard, surprised by his friend Kigo, who sneaked up behind him. Kigo was giving his friend a hopeful smile as he explained an unasked question. I don't know when it happened, but I was able to see spirits and I saw you with her a few times. He gave Ichigo a pat on the back. It's not just me either. Mizuiro and Chizuru can see them too. He wrapped his arms around Ichigo in a friendly hug. Just promise you guys will come back safely. He whispered. Kigo. Ichigo muttered, patting his friend's arms. If you don't let go, I'm breaking your arms. Kigo snorted out, but he got the message. Don't worry, we'll be fine. Catch you later, Ichigo. He yelled out. Mizuiro is taking me with him and his 10 lady friends to Hawaii. He cheered while skipping away. Well, I guess he deserves a break. Ichigo said, getting up to meet with Chad. There were a few people he had to introduce the giant to for his training. Karakura Hospital, main office. He took a deep breath, aware of what was going to happen. His father would likely disapprove of him going to Soul Society, wanting him to keep his mind focused on the goal of helping his cousin. Were that the case, he would allow it, but Yuryu still harbored a hate for Shinigami after Soken's death. Yuryu was still scared that he would abandon his friends simply for the sake of vengeance. Both father and son knew this, that made the decision difficult. I expect a full report when you get back, Yuryu. Ryukin said, finishing his evaluation of his son sitting across from him. He rose from his seat while Yuryu looked at his father in surprise. Your actions in Soul Society will determine how you and I proceed with your training. He said as he walked to his bookcase, shelves filled row by row with medical and surgical books and case studies, except for one solitary box on the top of it all. He took it from the dusty resting place, and passed it to his son. This is... Yuryu exclaimed. It was about as long as his forearm with a sandy color that was quite light with a seal tied taut around it. I trust you know how to use it. Ryukin asked his son, who nodded in affirmation. But this is still old Quincy methods. Yuryu protested. Shouldn't I bring my purification cross instead? Ryukin shook his head at his son. I'm not saying don't bring that with you. He firmly scolded his son. I'm telling you to fight with the Sanrei glove. Were you fighting hollows, I'd insist on the first, but you are fighting Shinigami. Ryukin explained. Fight with that and you'll have enough strength to do what must be done. He gave his son leave to go and train. As Yuryu was walking out the door, his father asked an oft-repeated question between the two. Why do you fight, Yuryu? Yuryu paused, knowing the answer, but feeling his own resolve being tested. He didn't care for Rukia, he was still angry with the Soul Reapers, but he knew why he fought. To help Ichigo, to protect the balance of the worlds. I fight to help my comrades. He said before leaving for the basement of the hospital, the hardest place to manipulate Reisher. In front of a warehouse. Ichigo remembered the last time he stood in front of that large building of wood. Something so simple, so plain, no one would recognize it or what was hidden inside. It was just after Chad's own powers manifested, Ichigo's hollow power grew more and more chaotic, necessitating this visit to others close to him. They eventually helped to teach him balance as they learned from him to understand their own powers more. These were the people best able to help Chad. You sure about this, Ichigo? Sato asked his friend, looking at the warehouse in a disappointed manner. These guys will be able to help me? Your powers seem more like a hollow's, Chad. Ichigo explained. We would have brought you here sooner, but it wasn't exactly the same. He turned to his large shield with a confident grin. So until we manage to find anyone that believes they can help you, trust me on this. He said before narrowly dodging a sandal being thrown at him. You think you can just show up without calling dumbass? Yelled an irate tomboyish little girl in a red track suit. You'd better get ready for a major A-dash. She was shoved out of the way as a white bullet with green hair tackled Ichigo. Berry Tan. I missed you. The hyperactive girl exclaimed, hugging Ichigo tightly. Mashiro, he said, pointing at the girls for his friend, and Hiyori. Just some of the new friends you're going to make. Yeah, sorry about that, Ichigo. Someone said, so casually that you wouldn't know someone was being cuddled to death while trying to dodge Hiyori swinging her sandals at him. Just wanted to see if your awareness was still up to par. The yellow-haired man was then hit with Hiyori being flung at him like a baseball. Screw you, Shinji. Ichigo got up and made his way inside the warehouse, Mashiro still clinging to his back cheering, horsey, excitedly. Ah. Chad started, slowly following after Ichigo. Just ignore her, Chad. He said as they entered the warehouse. Say hello, to the Vizards. The more dignified ones anyway. Ichigo said, bringing attention to the others. The large, green-suited Hachijin, the black-suited Rose, the silver-haired Kensei, and the star Afro Love. Who was laughing at something in his manga. Mostly. I guess. So this is the guy you were talking about? Rose asked, coming down to meet Ichigo face to face. He seems to be a man of good music tastes. You can get that from just a look. Ichigo asked as Kensei pried his former lieutenant of his back. He has that special air about him. He said, waving his arms around like he was conducting an orchestra. Tell me, Sato-san, do you play guitar? Yes, I do. Chad replied. How wonderful. Rose said, actually excited. We should play together sometime. He's not here for guitar lessons. Kensei yelled after he was done scolding his childish partner. He's here for training. He walked up to the giant, sizing him up. Show us. Chad took a moment to raise his right arm and summoned his powers. A black oily film covered the entirety of his right arm before solidifying into the familiar form. Definitely hollow in nature. Said Hiyori, coming up out of nowhere. She got back into her old roots as Kisuke's lieutenant when he created the Research and Development Institute of Soul Society. Being the former head researcher gave her some helpful skills. If I had to guess, you were born with these powers, and prolonged exposure to Ichigo. She turned to yell mockingly at the hybrid, who still couldn't control his Ryatsu, I might add. Screw you, monkey. Ichigo yelled back. Kensei glared at them to stop squabbling before things got out of hand. Anyway, because Ichigo has hollow-like racier himself, it helped awaken these dormant powers within. Hiyori said, finishing her analysis and feeling a little proud of herself. Kisuke already figured that out. Ichigo said, causing her to twitch in anger. You wanna go, you freaking jackass. I'll beat you from to dash. Hiyori. Shinji said, firmly. Hiyori actually stopped and looked at her de facto leader. How best do you think we can train him? Hiyori took a second to think. Fight us with our masks on, I guess. She said after a few seconds. The best way was probably to train in Huecomondo, but there was no way to get there. The Vizards learned many new techniques after Ichigo got them to come to terms with their hollows, but they couldn't get to the land of the hollows. I'll go first. Love said, getting up from his seat to lead Chad down into the training basement. Ichigo stayed behind with Hachijin. Hey Hachi. He said, getting the barrier master's attention. I need something. Yes, Ichigo. He said, respectfully of the boy. I need to learn one of your barrier spells. Ichigo said, in a serious tone. Which was ruined when he finally noticed an absence of a certain girl. Where's Lisa? Went to get the latest pawn. Shinji said, following the others into the basement. Why am I not surprised? Kisuke's training hall. Yoruchi watched as Orihime and Tatsuki traded blows against one another. Originally, she wanted Orihime to focus on gaining more control over her shields, but Tatsuki vouched for Orihime being a natural martial artist. The results were speaking for themselves as she proved herself a very graceful fighter. Yoruchi decided to focus on improving their martial arts while tossing in their special powers as well. Tatsuki slammed a fiery fist against Oriheim's shield while she sent Tsubaki to knock Tatsuki off her feet, who managed to recover by hand standing with a quick twist and striking against the shield again. Separate! Yoruchi yelled as they jumped away from each other. Oriheim jumping onto her Santen Keshin while Tatsuki managed a weak Shunpa jump. That's good. Take 5. Oriheim was swift and graceful while Tatsuki was strong and fast. You two are doing pretty well for novices, but we can't afford that with Soul Reaper captains and lieutenants. By the way, Sensei, Tatsuki spoke up from drinking her water, there's a karate tournament coming up that I promised to go to. Can we continue doing that? Yoruchi gave a dry look to her disciple. You realize that would be child's play for you, right? The cat-like woman said disapprovingly. Yeah, but I'd like the recognition for Ichigo to brag, I'm dating the strongest high schooler in the nation. She said, doing an impression of her boyfriend that seemed more like Isshin. Yoruchi could only chuckle at that thought. Fine, we'll go. She said, acquiescing to her student's desires. But you better win. You hear me, Arisawa? Yes, sensei. She yelled confidently. She and Oriheim got ready for the next bout when curiosity caught their sensei. By the way, she said almost teasingly, there's a fireworks festival next week and you'll have that time free to rest for the mission. Any plans of romance with a certain strawberry? She had a mischievous smile which only grew as she noticed a pair of luminescent blushes. We have plans, yes. Oriheim said hesitantly, clearly embarrassed and nervous. Oh my. Yoruchi thought, having an idea of what they were planning. Aren't you two the naughty ones? Kuchiki compound. Byakuya nursed his damaged arm while Yamamoto processed the information he just told him. Even after seeing Captain Unohana of the 4th Division, he still felt the burns of Ichigo's attack. He remembered facing down the boy, the force of that attack and the way he held himself. In 2 weeks, the old Shinigami finally spoke, that boy will come to Soul Society himself. To save Rukia Kuchiki, and to speak with me. The bold and brashness of the claim reminded the aged man of a former captain that disappeared some 20 years ago. I must admit, I am curious as to what that brat would have to talk to me about. If what I think is correct, he's been trained by the exiled captains and lieutenants. He said, letting his experience try to determine what the boy's aim is. You think he plans to destroy Seriidii? Byakuya asked calmly. Not at all. If that was his intention, he would not have told you anything. The old man said, stroking his long beard as he contemplated the strangeness of what was happening in Soul Society. The main governing body of Soul Society, the Central 46, were oddly insistent on Rukia being executed by the end of the month, and the method of choice was odd as well. Using the Sokayaku for Rukia is excessive, and if she did it to save Ichigo's family then her punishment should be imprisonment. There is more to this than we think. The noble asked, surprised at the possibility of the Godii 13 or the Central 46 being manipulated to use excessive force on a dutiful Soul Reaper. Possibly. The old man stated, rising from his seat. We'll hold off the execution until this Kurosaki comes to Soul Society. I'll have him found and monitored in secret. When they come here, I want them captured alive with Ichigo brought to me. I will hear what he has to say. Yamamoto began to walk to his division, enjoying the fine day they found themselves in. Thank you for the tea, Captain Kuchiki. 3 days later, Kurosaki household. It was morning and Yuzu was getting breakfast ready, a breakfast for 3 as her brother was still gone. Karen was sitting at the table, even more down than her usual stoicism. The mood was clear, they were worried and missed their brother. Karen. Yuzu started. Ichigo will be fine, right? TCH, yeah. Karen said with forced enthusiasm. Didn't you watch him wipe out all those hollows? Yeah, but, Dad says any captain can do that. Yuzu said. Some are stronger than others and there are other Soul Reapers that close to captain levels. Karen was about to say something else when she noticed her sister was trembling. She got up and walked over to Yuzu, who immediately latched onto her twin and started crying. I'm scared for Ichigo. I want to help him but I can't. Yeah. Karen replied, hugging her kinder twin in a gentle embrace. I know the feeling, Yuzu. You're worrying over nothing. They heard their father say as he came into the room. I know my son and he's going to be fine. He's strong, he said, generating several large balls of compressed rature floating above his hands, just like his parents. He smiled, feeling pride in his